We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Home Secretary warns a reliance on foreign workers will cause people to forget how to do things for themselves as she challenges the Prime Minister over net migration.
A very good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 15th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Well, as we start another week, here's what's leading the news this morning. Bereavement will today urge Rishi Sunak to bring immigration numbers down amid predictions net migration could reach as high as 1 million. In a speech today, she'll argue it's not racist to want to control Britain's borders.
Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of attempting to rig future elections with proposals to expand voting to EU nationals living in the UK and to 16-year-olds. Tory MPs claim the Labour leader is laying the groundwork for a second referendum.
NHS consultants could join junior doctors and nurses on the picket line as they begin voting in a strike ballot today. It comes as the head of the Royal College of Nursing warns walkouts will continue until Christmas unless they get a double-digit pay rise.
And Kate Winslet won big at the TV Baftas last night for her online addiction drama, I Am Ruth. The series, which stars her real-life daughter, Mia Threppleton, also took home the award for Best Drama, which the pair accepted on stage together.
Now, you see, have you watched that?
I haven't seen it, but I've seen all the press around it.
I'm sure it's very good.
Yeah.
Wouldn't watch it in a million years. Depressing.
Yeah, but it's actually tackling a really, really important issue. And she made an amazing speech last night. And she said, we want our children
Great
back.
actress.
Great actress, but also she's got a social conscience, and I applaud her.
So is the idea in I Am Ruth, she loses her daughter to drugs? Is that
No, it's all about social media and the power of the internet and depression and trying to get kids off their screens, basically.
Give me a
She's talked a lot about it.
Sort of Western or shoot-'em-up film or something. Honestly, you switch on that telly and it's nothing but doom, gloom and depression.
Well, we'll change that this morning.
We'll
bring you light and shade. Don't worry about that.
You looking like a mandarin as well. It's very, very nice.
I'll take
very,
that.
very nice. Very juicy.
Quite sunburnt, so.
Get in touch the usual way. You know what to do. There it is on your screen.
OK, so our top story this morning, the Home Secretary is issuing a warning to the Prime Minister as she delivers a speech saying a reliance on foreign labour will make us forget how to do things for ourselves.
Isabel Braverman will call for Conservatives to renew their 2019 manifesto commitment, which promised to reduce migration.
Her comments come ahead of the release of official figures, which are predicted to reveal record levels of net migration, with the Home Office braced for the figure to surpass 1 million this year.
Right, OK, migration, net migration figures, whatever, what do they mean?
Yeah.
Alex Crowley, former political director to Boris Johnson. What is a net migration figure, Alex?
That's simply the number of people who have come to settle in this country after the number of people who have also left. So it's what's essentially left over.
And what she's saying is there will be more than 1 million in favour of those coming to the country.
That is what is predicted.
Yes.
We need to be careful about predictions. We know that the last set of figures showed about 500,000 net migration. A lot of those, of course, were people coming from Ukraine, people coming from Hong Kong, special schemes to deal with particular circumstances. We don't know what the new figure is yet. There's just speculation about what it is.
There's a whole sector of people in this country who just love opening the doors. They love saying, come and see us in Britain. We have a proud nature of accepting refugees and immigrants, and we have a pride, all this pride nature, whatever it is. Can we afford to have these people here or not? That's all I want to know.
So there are two ways of looking at this. One is to say, well, actually, and this is what the Brexit referendum showed, is that we should be able to attract more of the world's talent to this country because they add a huge amount to this country. And I think most people probably accept that. One of our strengths is that people want to come here and contribute and make us collectively better off. However, there are problems as well. We don't build enough houses in this country already. And now, if we're looking at an increase in net migration, then there's probably going to be an increase. Where is the infrastructure to support that? If you're going to have a policy of increasing migration numbers, which is in practice what we have, despite the manifesto pledge, then the government also needs to put in the infrastructure.
What we've got, though, in Suella Braverman giving this speech is sort of a split in the cabinet, haven't we? She's going against the official line from Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, and even, I suppose you could say, the Education Secretary, who all accept that, as you say, migration can do a great deal for GDP and to boost growth for the country. She, on the other hand, is saying she wants to sort out these shortage occupation exemptions. So people who are fruit pickers, HGV drivers, etc., butchers, she doesn't want to bring them in from overseas. She wants us to do it here, otherwise we'll forget how to work. I put it to you, we've already forgotten. We don't want to do those jobs, or we certainly aren't paid enough to do them.
Well, the reality of the pandemic is that a huge amount of people left the workforce. That is just an economic fact. And so if you look at the Treasury's position, they will say, well, we need to fill those positions. There were shortages, if you remember, a year or so ago of HGV drivers, and that had a real impact on what food was on our shelves. Because, of course, if you haven't got someone to drive the lorry, the stuff isn't going to get here. So there's a very short-term practical reason for doing these things. And I suspect the Treasury and Rishi Sunak would argue that you can't just throw up the barrier immediately. You need to have some kind of plan if that's the aim of the policy, to have more UK nationals doing some of these jobs. Well, we need to have the skills programmes in place. We need to have the opportunities in place.
So how much will this speech ruffle the feathers, then, of Downing Street? Because she's also saying she wants, lorry drivers to be paid more. But hang on a minute. A moment ago, we were being told high wages are inflationary and we don't want to be paying lorry drivers more because that gets passed on to our food costs.
Well, indeed. This, unfortunately, is one of those cases where a cabinet minister hasn't quite got their own way within government. And so the last resort, when you haven't won the argument internally, is to perhaps go out and make a speech somewhere and try and get the rest of the people on your side.
Well, OK, so how's Sunak going to receive this personally? He's the boss man. He's put her in her position. Does he not say, oh, you, come here and have a word, button it?
One of the strengths of Sunak's leadership so far has been it's been reasonably disciplined within government, actually. We haven't seen the kind of the freewheeling leaking that we saw under Liz Truss, under Boris Johnson. And so this is quite an unusual departure from that generally holding the line position. Downing Street will be watching very closely. And if the Home Secretary does stray a bit too far from the line, then there may be a difficult telephone call.
Perhaps prompted by dissatisfaction dissatisfaction with the local election results, some of this breaking with discipline. Can we just ask you, before we let you go, about Labour over the weekend talking about possibly extending the vote not only to 16-year-olds but to settled migrants, people who pay income tax here?
Yeah.
But very controversial, people saying this is a backdoor to a second referendum on Brexit.
What we are seeing here is the beginnings of the Labour-Lib Dem flirtation. That's what it is. This is Labour putting out a nice little signal to the Lib Dems saying, hey, this is something that perhaps could be part of our future coalition deal. Of course, we know the Lib Dems would love nothing more than to take us back into the EU. And, of course, probably Starmer is maybe of that position too, deep down, if he could ever get away with it. It's a ridiculous idea for the simple reason that, of course, you would be giving EU nationals greater rights in the UK than perhaps UK nationals would have in EU countries.
Alex, hold that thought. When you come back, we're going to be talking about it again just after 7 o'clock this morning. Thank you very much indeed. But you raise a very interesting point, Isabel. You talk about this million net migration and how we need people from abroad, and lorry drivers and butchers and goodness knows what. I have a question, which is, how do people put bread on the table? How do these people who don't want these jobs, who don't want to pick crops and drive lorries and things, how do they pay for themselves? What do they do? I mean, I have this fear. I always think, gosh, if I didn't do this, what would I do?
Well, people talk about the benefit culture, don't they, in the UK, which is more generous than comparative other countries. So presumably those people who don't want to do those jobs and are staying at home but could work are claiming benefits. But a lot of people would push back on that and say, you know, you have to meet certain criteria to be able to be claiming benefits, and it's not like we're lazy Brits.
Well, I just find it incredible that people do survive, because this is an expensive country. There's absolutely no doubt to do anything is expensive. I often find myself, I thank God I'm in a job that pays me well and that I can afford certain things, you know, to go to a motorway service station and buy a meal for the family. Oh, you know, to go to the cinema. Incredible. All sorts of things like that. And yet we seem to have a workforce that can't be bothered, that say, no, do you know what, I'm OK as I am. Let us know how you get by, how they get by, and what you think of this whole net migration business. The time now is 6:10.
We're going to turn our attention now to Turkey. A developing story overnight there. Their relationship with the West is hanging in the balance, with last night's general election vote likely heading to now a runoff later this month after neither candidate secured an outright majority.
Now, the vote will decide Turkey's foreign policy direction, with challengers vowing to build a stronger relationship with NATO and the European Union. Now, the main opposition leader has also accused Russia of interfering in the vote. Journalist Ali Mustafa joins us now from Istanbul, one of my favourite cities on the whole planet, it has to be said. It is an amazing place where East meets West. Where's it going to go, East or West?
Neither way. And if you look at what happened last night, it seems that the wheeling, dealing ways of the long-running Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will continue. This was a long night. 90% voter turnout estimated, and it went down to the wire, so much so that this morning you're still below 99% reporting on districts. Given that Erdogan secured just over 49% of the vote, Kılıçdaroğlu, his main rival and a contender, is around 45, between 45 and 46, and the kingmaker, this nationalist candidate that not many people outside of Turkey have heard of, Sinan Ogan, is at around 5%. And when it goes into a runoff 2 weeks from now, on the 28th of May, Sinan Ogan, this minor candidate, will emerge, or likely emerge, as a kingmaker. But whoever comes, and most likely it'll be Erdogan, because the way these politics in Turkey works, it's almost these tectonic plates. Making alliances is always opposed in some way or the other, and this is what happened here as well. You had a table of 6 opposition parties that backed this candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, from the CHP, which is one of the founding parties of Turkey, make an indirect alliance with a pro-Kurdish HDP. Now, while that garnered him some support in the east, it turned a lot of Turkish nationalists, of which 65% of this country identifies as nationalistic, turned against Kılıçdaroğlu and backed Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Interesting you mentioned tectonic plates. The backdrop, I suppose, to all of this and this particular election is the 2 earthquakes earlier in the year, the rampant inflation that's making everybody feel worse off. And I suppose that will be one of the reasons that President Erdogan's feeling the heat this time after having won so many elections so easily in the past.
When it comes to Turkey, you have to realize that economic or other issues which basically have to do with feeding your family, for example, or the earthquake, which was the worst natural calamity that this country has faced ever in its existence, don't really matter. This is a country where politics still is run on culture wars. When Erdogan came to power more than 20 years ago, around 20 years ago, he came because the pendulum had swung so much to the other side that there were limits to people who covered their heads to education, to social welfare, to even politics. In fact, the first woman who entered the parliament here with a headscarf was in the late 1990s. And despite all this inflation, this runaway inflation, 174% unofficially, earthquake, which has killed more than 50,000 people, destroyed a huge chunk of this country, the size of parts of Britain, some would argue, didn't really matter because it came down to culture wars. And when Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the opposition candidate, made an informal alliance with the HDP, the pro-Kurdish HDP, it became a question of security versus terrorism. And in that context, Erdogan, who is seen as a quote-unquote strong man, well, he has no rival.
Ali Mustafa, thank you for explaining that to all of us. And as you say, we look to those runoffs in a couple of weeks now. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you very much. Turkey, I think the most magical, mystical country I've ever visited, and I've had all my best holidays in Turkey.
Yeah.
I think it's and Istanbul.
I've gone through, you asked me a moment ago if I'd been to Istanbul. I've been to the airport. That's the extent of it. But as you say, it's just the clash of the cultures, but in all the best ways, the kind of hybrid of cultures, I suppose, is a better way of describing it. East meets West.
You're right about airports. There's countries, I've been to Barcelona, but only the airport. I've been to Dallas, but only the airport. I could go around in all these places where you just have slept on the seat.
I recommend Barcelona. It's wonderful. It's actually probably my favourite city in Europe.
I must
big claim, isn't it?
Leave the terminal the next time I get there. Let's bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise. Here's how it's standing.
The Prime Minister says new community diagnostic clinics will drive down NHS waiting lists. More than 100 centres are already being used across England, with 30 more set to open before the end of the year.
The average monthly rent paid on newly let homes across Britain was £125 higher in April than it was this time last year. It tallies up to an extra £1,500 more in rental each year.
Senior doctors have started voting on whether to strike over pay. It comes after the BMA Consultants Committee said talks with the government remain deadlocked. The ballot will remain open now until the end of June. Now, you wanted to talk about the Pope, didn't you? He's been asking Italians to have more sex. Did you not?
No, I
thought
didn't.
You sent that to us over the weekend, no?
No, I threw it out for debate. I threw it
okay.
out debate. Basically, Pope Francis urges Italians to have more rumpy-bumpy for the sake of the country. Well, you see, it sort of gets me. As a Roman Catholic, I would look and I'd think, now, what are you talking about, Holy Father, about this? Because, for instance, he only allows sex within in a marriage situation. It wouldn't be allowed outside that.
And between a man and a woman.
And between a man and a woman. And for procreation, obviously. But you see, I think animals, for a lot of people, are...
Well, we need to add that point in, because he was saying people are having dogs and cats instead of babies.
Yeah. And I think they are a great source of comfort to a lot of people. And I think that he should see the spirituality that an animal brings to people's lives. So I don't know what the whole push for procreation. I mean, there are too many people in the world for a start.
I know.
And too many brats, kids around the place.
And also, I think, bless him in his innocence, the Holy Father has confused sex with children, with population, because obviously people are still having loads of sex in Italy. They're just not having as many kids.
You mean people enjoy sex? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we don't want to tell the Pope that, but probably, yeah.
Could well be the case.
Break it to him.
What's that song? Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you
617.
and me. Do you not know that song?
Yeah, of course I do.
Let's talk about all the things. Let's talk about...
There's a reason I don't sing on the telly. Right, listen, we're going to change tack now and talk about something much more serious, but I suppose something that the church talks about a lot, and it is the death of loved ones. Nobody wants to end up in a back and forth with their employer about bereavement guidelines.
I mean, ridiculous. You see, I have a thing. In Ireland, we understand bereavement much better. We're much more...
compassionate?
Comfortable, maybe, with death than people are in England, particularly southern England. And I think part of the problem in England is the fact that nobody can be buried within 10 days or so of dying.
I think it's too soon in Ireland.
No.
Oh, it's
no, I think
like
you're
3
dealing,
days, isn't it?
Yeah, you're dealing with your grief and everything then, and it's. I think it's very, very strange to be waiting 2 weeks before you put someone in the ground. Or what do you do now? You do that.
Cremation.
Don't cremate me. I don't want cremated.
I'm not involved.
I don't want cremated. I'm just letting you know.
Me neither.
I want a plot. I want a big headstone.
Mausoleum.
I want you turning up in black with
Weeping.
a veil. Well, at least pretend to weep.
Veil.
At least pretend to weep, and join all those other women that will be lined up there weeping, like that. But no, all this burning people and putting them in ashes and whatever it is. I don't want that. So there's Eamonn up in the fire and the mantelpiece.
Lots of comfort for people, and they can...
Well, what's the comfort? Sure,
scattering the ashes. Well, people...
Come the last day when St Gabriel blows his horn, well, you can't get out of your ashes.
But, you know, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, back to from whence you came. No. Anyway, there's a new scheme being trialled by the supermarket chain, the Co-op.
It's all at the Co-op now. That was an advert.
Yeah.
Do you remember that advert? No. Well, being dead is at the Co-op. It's part of it all. The aim is to make things easier for workers following a bereavement. And our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper, there's a good name, the Grim Reaper, for this story.
Losing a loved one is something that ultimately affects us all. And when it does, sometimes it can be a struggle to try and balance grief with work.
When I lost Mum, it was so out of the blue and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't care about anything either. So it was, I just felt like I was a different person and nothing seemed to make sense or matter anymore at the time, least of all work.
When Debbie lost her mum, she was fortunate enough to receive support and flexibility from her employer. As a result, she was able to take the time she needed to process her grief.
We talk about bereavement like it's a word, but it's a person. It's about human connection and it's about people that have been lost. I was really fortunate in hindsight because if I hadn't, I know I wouldn't have been able to come back to work at all.
Bereavement leave is one of the top 10 concerns of UK workers right now. And yet new research has found that almost half of the people asked took less than a week off after losing a loved one. Meanwhile, 16% were told by employers they couldn't have any time off at all. To combat this, the Co-op has just introduced a new policy which not only doubles the number of compassionate leave days employees can take, it also offers them more flexibility in how they can take them.
Everybody treats bereavement and grief in a really personal way, so having that flexibility of leave is really important. 15% of people have said that time off at the beginning was really important to their well-being, helping them deal with it, helping them go through it, and then helping them settle back into what is then their new world.
Now, other businesses are being encouraged to follow suit in order to help their workers to cope with grief.
The more that we can help people be strong in terms of how they're dealing with their bereavement, the more that we can support them, the better their mental health will be, the less absence we have, the more positive people can be when they're back at work, which is better for everybody.
The loss of a loved one can be a confusing, emotional time. But by making small changes to company policy, employers could make a big difference. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
And, you know, I often think when we start the day and all the angry people who want to complain about whatever they want to complain about. But imagine starting the day with bereavement on your mind, that you've lost someone, and I know there will be many, many, many hundreds of you who are watching who that will have happened to. That is a really, really awful feeling. Our condolences to you if that is what you're going through.
Absolutely. Listen, stay with us. We're going to take a look at some of the big winners from last night's TV Baftas after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Doobs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:25 still to come on our breakfast show this morning.
At 6:45, we'll take a look at the dangers of marathon mortgages. With retirees being hit by rising interest rates and the cost of living, there are concerns many may not be able to make payments.
And as A-levels and GCEs start in England, we'll ask if society puts too much importance on exams and if you would be better off without them. Well, what would you do instead of them? That's the question.
It's not just GCSEs and A-levels, it's SATs as well. My 7-year-old's got the next 2 weeks of exams every day at primary school, and all across the country, all the little ones are doing the same.
He'll have nothing to worry about.
Let us know, though. Well, the pressure starts young.
Too smart for his own good, that one.
Outfoxing me, that's for sure. Let us know your thoughts this morning. Lots of views coming in. Actually, quite a few, I should say, on the Home Secretary's plans. Andy says, train our own people, pay them a proper wage, problem solved. Dean says, I don't think visas are the problem. How many of us would like to do the jobs that immigrants are doing? Some couldn't even be bothered to clean up after themselves when camping in Green Park. And Janice says, we cannot just keep receiving people and building to cope with population growth. Keep your views coming in. GB Views, gbnews.uk.
Last night was a big gathering of TV types last night. It was very funny to watch all these so-called stars of the small screen, none of whom are in any programmes, queuing up last night to honour the best in the industry at the Baftas. I'm looking at names, I'm looking at faces. What programme does she do? What programme does she do?
Billy Piper was in
what?
The shortlist for top... it was
Best
Don't
Actress.
Talk About...
Yes.
What's her name?
Susie.
Susie. Don't Talk About Susie. But she was up for... I Hate Susie even. Anyway, she was in the final 6 for Best Actress. But yeah, there were a few nobodies. There always are, these things. But anyway, we're focusing on the big ones.
There's somebody called Wishaw, who they seemed to be the only person they had in the audience because there's always just close-ups of him. He won something last night, though.
Yeah, because he's the voice of Paddington Bear, of course.
Oh, is he?
So there he is, and he also won Best Actor.
Cameron never left him last night, really. Ellie Phillips was there to talk us through what happened and what awards went where. Ellie, good morning.
Good morning. I am very tired, but I've had a wonderful evening.
From Eurovision to the Baftas. What a busy girl you are.
This has been a whirlwind week. Thrown straight into the Baftas. It was wonderful, and you're right, there's the mix of kind of big A-list celebrities and then, you know, reality stars and things like that. But I think that's what makes the TV Awards so much fun to be actually. Like, when would you be in a room with this random mix of people? But big winners last night, I was really happy to see the Traitors. They won 2 awards. So they won for reality instructed or factual and entertainment performance for Claudia Winkleman. Really well deserved when it comes to that, because
she did a hilarious speech as well. Really showed her class, I think.
Yeah,
she was just outstanding in her acceptance speech. So many of them cry, so many of them get nervous, so many of them mumble or read off pieces of paper. She was hilarious.
Yeah,
and off the cuff.
Off the cuff. I mean, and even if it wasn't, it was delivered in such a way that was brilliant.
Act.
So she was amazing. Derry Girls also won 2, and Siobhan Sweeney, she won Best Actress in a Scripted Comedy. If you've seen it, she plays the mean nun, and she was so shocked, and it was really good to see that. And obviously Derry Girls is finished now, so it was a really lovely way for that to end. Bad Sisters, if you've seen that on Apple TV, it's brilliant. It's about domestic abuse, but it's presented in a way that's funny and easy to digest. They won 2 as well. Anne-Marie Duffy, who plays the woman who's being abused, she won, and she's phenomenal. She was really shocked.
Sharon Horgan's show.
Yes,
she's fantastic.
Oh, wonderful. And then the other one that I have to shout about is I Am Ruth, which won Best Single Drama, and Kate Winslet, who won Best Actress. And we do have a clip of her speech, which was very special indeed.
If I could cut this in half, I would give the other half to my daughter, Mia Threppleton. We did this together, kiddo. There were days when it was agony for her to dig as deeply as she did into very frightening emotional territory sometimes, and it took my breath away. I Am Ruth was made for parents and their children, for families who feel that they are held hostage by the perils of the online world, for parents who wish they could still communicate with their teenagers, but who no longer can, and for young people who have become addicted to social media and its darker sides. This does not need to be your life. To people in power and to people who can make change, please criminalize harmful content. Please eradicate harmful content. We don't want it. We want our children back.
You see, she's just an absolute star for me. I mean, that speech was... I mean, she's an incredible actress, but to be shining a light on such a serious issue, I applaud her.
And also, she was phenomenal, and I think I really appreciate when celebrities, especially of that stature, use their platforms for positive change. And like she said, her daughter there, they starred in it together. And sometimes you think, oh, Nepo baby, but her daughter is phenomenal. Like, really, really good actress. So that was really wonderful to see. And I actually spoke to Kate afterwards, and she said that she really hopes there's kind of a ripple effect from this. So it's not just the show, it's now today people talk about how bad social media can be for younger people, and how do we stop it becoming this area where there is no control forevermore, and so that the next generation of younger children don't have to deal with the negatives of it. So yeah, really positive there.
And Eamonn touched on Best Actor. As he said, the camera's barely off him throughout the whole thing.
Ben Whishaw, so he won Best Actor, and then he also got back up again because P&O Cruise's memorable moment it went to Paddington Meets the Queen, which was that lovely speech that we saw during the Platinum Jubilee. And when he got up to accept that, when they got up to accept that, they played a video of Paddington in the audience, clapping. So it was if Paddington was there with them accepting the award, and the acceptance speech was lovely. They said, you know, realistically, this actually should be going to Her Majesty. She's not here. So they said, this is for you, Ma'am.
Were there any royals there?
No, there were not royals there last night.
It's funny because I think in many ways the people's vote in that particular category were voting for the Queen, weren't they? Because obviously it was such a big year last year. But that sequence with Paddington Bear was loved even before we knew how the story was going to end with the Queen. And his voice is so iconic now. He starred in so many things. Mary Poppins Returns. He's obviously the voice of Paddington in all the Paddington movies. And now his latest one, This Is Going to Hurt, which is the short film of the book that was talking about maternity services and the NHS.
Yeah, and when he was talking in his speech and stuff, he said, you know, a lot of people there's a lot of references to the NHS. There were a lot of references through the night to kind of like speaking out. There were moments through the night that were political, but they were so short, and they kind of just got to the the point and said it. I'm like, here's my minute, there's your point, go. And so that was nice. It kind of kept the momentum going. It wasn't these droning speeches about, you know, how the world is over and things like that. People kept things quite light and upbeat, so it was a fun watch. And I've got to say that Rob Beckett and Ramesh Rangathan, who hosted, were genius. Because last year you had Richard Ayoade, who is, you know, is deadpan. And it's a bit, you know, OK, one person, but to have deadpan, which was Ramesh, and hilarious, it was Rob Beckett, playing off each other, worked so wonderfully.
And it's very British humour, isn't it?
Oh,
it's just everyone understands it.
Yeah. And they took the mick out of themselves,
Yeah.
like people in the audience,
each other.
Oh, it was
fabulous.
great to see. Yeah.
What about you? There should be an award for you for stamina over the weekend, hey? Eurovision.
I'm going to put a big thank you out to whoever invented concealer and heavy makeup, because that is keeping me through at the moment.
Fabulous. Well done, you. Thanks very much.
I think there should have been a special award for Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby for Best Actors. They may or may not be together on the telly today, but he's brought in lawyers, she's brought in PR team. The public surely suss that there's no chemistry, that it's a broken fit between the two of them, and the fact that This Morning does not depend on who presents it. It's an institution. It will carry on no matter who presents it, and anybody can check the viewing figures. There's no difference between whether they present it or anyone else
Well, you know what, Eamonn, they are on the front of a lot of the papers, quite a lot of the papers carrying double-page spreads on that, and we'll be going through the papers in just a moment. This morning, we're joined by Sean McDonald and Anna Mikhailova.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. Let's take you through the front pages of the newspapers, kicking off with The Times this morning. It's leading on the Home Secretary's warning that Britons will forget how to work unless net migration is limited.
Telegraph also draws attention to Suella Braverman and her urging Rishi Sunak to deliver on Tory manifesto promises.
The Express says Tory MPs are angry about what they say is Labour's plan to reopen Brexit.
Metro says that nurses are to strike until Christmas unless they get a double-digit pay rise. More on that throughout the programme. And joining us to discuss what the papers are saying, Sean McDonald and Anna Mikhailova, with their views on what you will be seeing there on this Monday. So here we are, Anna. It is a Monday, and we all know that feeling. Have you got a bit of a sore throat? Do you really want to go to school today? It all comes to us from school age. And we hear that around 1,700 parents a month are being prosecuted now by schools for truancy. So are the parents being held responsibility if junior doesn't make it into the classroom.
Yeah, they are, and that number has actually doubled. So the Telegraph's got these stats showing that parents are not only, being charged, but also the numbers are hugely shot up. And this is all because after COVID, we've just got this huge phenomenon, this completely misunderstood phenomenon of kids not turning up to school. And teachers just can't... The problem is, a lot of them, you'd have no idea why even. So a lot of the kids are missing from the system after the pandemic. And the charging parents has been a way to try and claw that back, try and address it, but it's still not working.
But Anna, I would say this goes beyond the problem with COVID. I mean, we've had, 5 missed days this year alone from strikes. We've had extra bank holidays, and this is the first Monday in the last few weeks that we've had children in a classroom. You add all that on, and I notice it in my own household, the kids are saying, can't we go to soft play today instead of school, because they're used to every other week there's a strike and they don't have to bother.
Yeah, absolutely, there's that as well. And in terms of actually how kids are missing school, when you look at the detail of it, often it's not they're missing for weeks on end, it's a day a week, that's, as you said. So, of course, if you're getting used to not turning up one day a week, but what it'll create is an even greater disparity between, for example, independent schools that haven't been affected by strikes in that way, to kids who are increasingly missing out.
Sean, what did you call it? We called it mitching, hiking, hooky. I think there's a lot
Hookie's American, isn't it?
Is it?
Is it in Scotland? Around the Central Belt, we call it dogging it, which is open to misinterpretation, I think. But that's what it was called. So I know Isabel's looking at me like, don't say that word. But
what was the word?
Dogging it.
Dogging it.
To be distinct from dogging.
Yes, it was very much not going dogging, but it was called.
Were
dogging
you a dogger?
Yes, frequently.
Yeah.
Only at school age.
It was a great science. It was a science if you applied it. At my school, it was like escaping from Colditz Castle, really. And if you could do it, the real trick was to get in, be there for roll call, and then to disappear after that.
Yeah, I would just disappear. Sometimes you could get people to kind of say that, just say here, if the register was called.
If you bunked off, did you not have to work extra hard when you were back? Because that's why I didn't even like being off school ill, because then you missed everything.
When you're
you have to keep
naturally
up.
smart.
Yeah, you never did any work.
Just come up and nail it.
I was always really studious, and if I missed it, I was worrying. Anyway.
So what's your view on it? So it has always been, is my point with this. But it looks like the authorities are maybe getting more serious about it, Sean?
Yeah, it seems so. I can understand why you'd want to clamp down on that. You want to make sure that children are getting a proper education, and missing days can interrupt their sort of process of preparing for exams and so on. And especially, as Isabel just pointed out, there's been a lot of disruption, whether it's COVID and strikes. And yeah, it makes sense to me that they would clamp down, to be honest, because ultimately parents are responsible, aren't they? It's not really the child's fault, or the child should at least be put in a sort of discipline structure.
Right, talking about discipline structure, Suella Braverman believes that Britons will forget how to work. And basically, she's sitting in cabinet, whatever, so she's at this big conference today where she's going to be more than an embarrassment, I would have thought, to the Prime Minister, which says he's not tough enough on migration the way that he should be.
This is, to me, so the story that's leading that's on the front page of the Times, that we should be cutting migration, that we should be training British workers to come and do these jobs. I just think this is absolute nonsense, dog whistle stuff. You know, on Friday, I was discussing a story about how if we could get 400,000 more people into work, then we'd be able to cut the tax rate by 2p. There's there are rafts of people that are leaving the country post-Brexit. This is just hostile language and saying, we should be really cutting this down. Immigration is what makes, you have to control it, there have to be criteria set, but just saying, we should just curb this and it should just stop, I just find it really hostile.
Do you think sometimes people conflate it with racism? I mean, the Home Secretary's come out saying it's not racist to try and control our borders, but, net migration includes people coming from Australia, from America, from Canada, but there's this kind of fear of...
It's not racist to say you should control immigration, but to then say jobs that foreigners are doing, we could train Brits to do them, what kind of language is that? What kind of assertion is that to make? it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But she's talking about why can't we have HGV drivers, butchers, fruit pickers, jobs that would maybe be associated with foreign nationals coming in. I think jobs that she's describing as low-skilled labour.
And low pay.
And yeah, for me, honestly, it beggars belief.
Well, Anna, I'd put it to the Home Secretary that the reason we have to import people to do these jobs is because we don't want to do them.
Yeah, I mean, although fruit pickers, I do think we should have some kind of system of, young students being ferried out there, do a stint, because you do need to fill these jobs. You do actually need to maybe encourage people to consider them as well and not realise that they can be a stepping stone to something and good experience. But all of that aside, I think this intervention is so confused from the government right now, because just yesterday we had Grant Shapps going on all the television stations and arguing the exact opposite point, saying that it's good that they've had increased net migration, not increased legal migration, because it's all us being accepting Ukrainian refugees and people from Hong Kong. And so how can it be both things? How can you have the Home Secretary saying this and then other ministers saying the complete opposite?
And do you think it's indicative of dissatisfaction with those local election results, that there is a bit of a break in discipline from within the Cabinet?
I think this thing with Braverman goes back much further than that. It's indicative of the general pressures on the Prime Minister from the right wing of the party, who he tried to appease by bringing her into the job in the first place. So what she's saying is not surprising and is completely within her own playbook, but yeah.
Right, I'll tell you what I think's surprising. Front page of the Telegraph, Sean. Most teenagers are aware of friends who want to swap gender. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't teenagers who want to swap gender, but to say that most teenagers, that shows me, we just talked about school days there in the story previously, but I was never aware at school of anybody wanting to swap gender, but it's not a thing.
No, yeah, I wasn't either. When I was at school, I was there just slightly more recently than you were. But yeah, saying the majority of teenagers know somebody at their school who wants to change gender, according to a report. And this is basically now, I think this is in England, it's found that a poll of almost 1,200 teenagers aged 16 to 18 in England found that 10% claimed they wanted to change or had already done so, and a further 54% said they knew somebody at their school who wanted to change. This has basically brought up a debate about an independent review of sex education in schools in England after MPs are warning that there was age-inappropriate content. It's a very difficult one for me to speak on, actually. Isabel, you'd probably be best to give your opinion on this one, having kids at that age.
All I think is that teenage years, when you are absolutely raging with hormones, is not a time to be making decisions that will affect the rest of your life and also your ability to have children in some cases. I think we have to allow teenagers to be teenagers and make difficult decisions once they're fully formed adults. But this suggestion that, as soon as you feel like you want to change gender at 13, then you can go down that path, actually is doing those kids a disservice, in my opinion. Let them grow up and then address it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that in the sort of limited knowledge or understanding I have of how how kids' minds work. It was quite long ago now, and it's difficult to sort of remember, but I think it's true. It should be taken seriously, if they're making sort of assertions or they're making claims, and they should be listened to and discussed. But yeah,
the conversation, Sean, must be serious. I mean, I don't think you would necessarily say to a teenage friend, I want to change sex, unless you meant it. It's not just a flirtation.
It's a difficult one, isn't it, if you've never been in that position?
Yeah.
It's very difficult for us to tell people how they feel, but I think, it seems to be a lifelong change, and it should be done with probably going over with a fine-tooth comb.
OK, talking about lifelong changes, Anna, we go to the Mail, and this is front page and page 6 here. Keir Starmer accused of a plot to rig future elections. How's he going to do that?
So this is plans being discussed within Labour that have come out through yesterday's Sunday Telegraph about how Keir Starmer was apparently considering giving the right to vote to EU citizens who aren't British citizens but who have been here for a while, who are paying taxes. And the argument within Labour for doing this is that it would be more democratic. Obviously, the argument against it is it would enfranchise people in a way that in those countries British expats would never have the right to vote. And of course, everything with elections is always politicians are always looking at ways to boost their own vote. So, of course, someone like Keir Starmer, who has spent his life, his political career being so pro-EU, it would be a pretty big vote winner for him, I think.
It was interesting. We had a guest on just at the top of the 6 who thought that it was a sort of opening gambit of flirtation with the Lib Dems because the Labour Party know they probably won't get an overall majority. This is the kind of policy that could sway some of those voters.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and certainly more and more of that will be going on behind the scenes. I think when we talk about, there's so much conversation right now about will they do a deal with the Lib Dems, and this is an example of no one actually has to do a formal deal, but there can be policies where it is known that they will have agreement on, as you say, flirtation, and it doesn't have to be set in stone.
And Sean, the Express also taking this story, they call it outrage over Labour plan to reopen Brexit. I mean, that's a slightly even sort of more cynical take, that this isn't just about expanding their vote, but actually it's trying to reverse Brexit.
Yeah, well, they're saying that Keir Starmer's been accused of trying to drag Britain back into the EU with his plan to give millions of citizens the vote, is the way that the Express are leading with it. I think very misleading. I don't think the whole language of trying to drag Britain back into the EU, there's a large portion of people who'd like to do that. That's a conversation for another time. It is definitely one just for winning votes, as Anna's pointing out. Having lived in Spain for years, we were discussing this. I was allowed to participate in local elections, but not in national elections. So I can understand the sort of anger, because it's not something that's reciprocated. And I can't speak for other EU countries, but certainly not in Spain, in my experience. He also wants to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote. They did that in the Scottish referendum. It's again, it's a bit of a murky area.
What do you think about that? Because every other sort of measure of adulthood isn't allowed at 16. You still go to a children's court if you're in trouble. You can't marry anymore. I think they've changed the rules.
Have they changed
You can't
that?
get married at 16.
Right.
You can't drive at 16. But yet you could vote.
Yeah, I think the old argument of you can get married...
Yeah, but you should be able to drive and you should be able to do those other things.
But the old argument of you can get married, you can vote, you can go to the army, you can do all of these things, but you can't choose your government, is now that argument is kind of being diminished a wee bit, as you say, you can't get married, which I don't think you should.
When we all think of when we were 16, Anna, did you think you could change the world at 16? I know I did, didn't I?
Yeah, and that's sort of the point, isn't it? Most 16, 17-year-olds are probably more engaged than anyone else.
Very idealistic, probably as well. What do you think, Isabel?
Well, it's interesting because at 16 you're not, very rarely anyway, standing on your own 2 feet. You're not necessarily paying taxes. You don't necessarily earn a wage. Yeah. Can you really understand the issues that the public conversation is largely around? That's not to say they shouldn't, but I do think it has to be a consideration in the debate.
Sean?
What, do I think they should be able to vote?
No, did you want to vote at 16?
Oh, right. Yeah, I was quite politically engaged, but I don't know. I don't think I really gave it too much thought at the time. I think I took it as, I'm not allowed to, so I don't even really think about it. Had I been allowed to, I would have participated.
All right, we'll have another think about that. Sean and Anna, they'll be back in 40 minutes' time. Thank you both very much indeed. Time is 10 minutes to 7. Let's bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise.
Turkey's presidential election appears to be heading for a runoff, as it appears the 2 candidates will fail to clear the 50% threshold needed to avoid a second round. If both candidates don't pass the threshold, there'll be a second round on the 28th of May.
2 teacher unions have opened new ballots for strike action, potential industrial action set to take place in the autumn. The National Association of Head Teachers and the National Education Union launched a new vote after rejecting the latest pay offer.
Kate Winslet won big at the TV Baftas last night for her online addiction drama I Am Ruth. The series, which stars her real-life daughter Mia Threppleton, also took home the award for Best Drama, which the pair accepted on stage together. So Mo Farah won in the documentary category for his film, which revealed he was illegally trafficked to the UK as a child.
Now, mortgages. When I took up my first mortgage, the idea was that it would all be paid off in 25 years.
Lovely.
Right, you would have 25 years and it all be done and dusted, which it wasn't. But anyway, fears are growing over the rise of what are called marathon mortgages, where you take out a mortgage of up to 40 years.
Yes, but the trouble is people are getting their first homes much later in life and securing longer mortgage terms, which means that many retirees will not be able to make their payments amid high interest rates and inflation.
Yeah. Think about it. You take that mortgage out and you might be
40.
30. Yeah, so I was thinking 35 or whatever, and then, you know, you're expected to take it until mid-70s with no earnings, whatever. Consumer and retail expert Kate Hardcastle can tell us more on this one. I mean, I suppose, why grant them, Kate? Why grant a 40-year mortgage to someone in their mid-30s or later?
Well, good morning. I think they're granting them, Eamonn, because a lot of the time this is people's first brick on the property ladder and they're not having any other choice. So do you let people have a mortgage at 33, 35 or say that's it, you're never going to be able to buy a house or a home? I think it's understandable why it's happened. But with the average age, obviously, at 33 now for first-time buyers coming onto the market, if you've got a 40-year mortgage, you're going to be 73, and that means you've got to do some really decent financial planning to make sure you're going to be in a position and have the comfort that you want in life to be paying mortgage payments still at 73 years old.
And there'll be few people who'll be able to, as you say, take those financial steps along the way. And so therefore there is this fear of some sort of retirement crisis in relation to housing.
That's exactly right, because I think many of us have this idyllic view of what we'd like to do in retirement. We know that the figures are around 20 to 30,000 needed per person if you want what's classed as a moderate lifestyle for income then. It goes up to 50 plus if you want a couple of holidays a year in there. But all of those figures are always calculated when you're doing your planning on not having a major rent or mortgage payment to deal with at that time. We know that interest rates are peaking. We saw that at the end of 2022. We know we've got more to come this year. A lot of people tussling themselves trying to find a payable and affordable remortgage if they're coming to the end of their mortgage terms, and just looking at the basics right here, right now, which is understandable. What can I afford to do when fuel costs and food prices are going up so much? But if you don't have that big financial plan ahead, Isabel, that's the challenge. You know, right now and right here isn't going to help you deal with logistics. And a lot of people, I think, are saying, look, perhaps when I'm older, I can make bigger payments off this. Great to do in an ideal world, but is that realistically going to happen?
Especially with artificial intelligence coming to take jobs away from people, having job security, that'll be a big factor. Having your health is a big factor as well, because you don't bank on that being taken away. But the thing that gets me, Kate, is that the inertia from government and politicians in general. We have a story today about rents rising above £1,000 all around the country on average today. And we know there is not enough housing stock in the whole country. And to build more houses would bring the price of houses down, it would bring the price of mortgages down, the price of rent down. And yet it does not happen. What are we storing up here?
You're absolutely right to point out that the medicine to this isn't good enough in terms of people just being able to find a mortgage or a rent that's payable. It's about trying to create the situation where we ease it out by having more stock. By more stock, we need more affordable housing, full stop, everywhere across the UK. And we heard that when the Tories came to party, we would have an amount of houses built. They're not at that amount yet because we know they've been dealing with other issues, COVID, etc. But this has to be a focus of the government from now in. We have a rent crisis going on. Average rent, we heard this morning, going up £120 per month, Eamonn. 120 quid per month, that's a lot to tussle with. So what you're looking at, a change of area, maybe a change of size of property. We know mortgage rates are going up. And you get it all on all sides. So it's about being financially viable yourself and visible to what's happening. But really, the big change is going to be more affordable housing for us all to be able to select from. That's going to ease the situation and the heat.
Not a pretty picture, Kate. Thank you very much indeed. We've got to leave it there. A gloomy outlook on this Monday morning if you're in your 30s and looking to get a mortgage. Stay with us. We'll have more on Suella Braverman's warning to the Prime Minister over net migration.
And not such a gloomy outlook with Stephen Keats and your forecast.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your morning update from the Met Office. And we've got a damp start across southeast England this morning, but the rain should soon clear away. Otherwise, a picture of sunny spells and a few showers, but wherever you are, it will be feeling a bit cooler out there compared to some recent mornings. And that's because behind this cold front, we've got this cooler air mass which will slowly be spilling its way across all parts of the UK. And this will set to dominate things, actually, for the first half of this coming week. So a rather damp start this morning across the far southeast of England, but the rain should clear away, and by lunchtime, skies should have brightened for most. Elsewhere, a fair amount of cloud infilling after a bright and promising start, and there will be a few showers across parts of Scotland, northern and eastern England, and the odd heavy burst is possible in these showers as we go through this afternoon. Whereas further south and west, that's where we've got the best of the sunshine, lighter winds, so feeling warmer here, even though temperatures only peaking at 17 or 18 Celsius, and quite a cool, nagging wind around some North Sea coasts and for the far north of Scotland. Showers then tended to fade through this evening, and most places then becoming dry for a time overnight. In fact, lengthy clear spells across a good part of the UK, and where we've got these clear skies and coupled with light winds, those temperatures will be falling away. So quite a cold night to come for the time of year. Temperatures in towns and cities widely into low to mid single figures. In the coolest spots across parts of northern eastern England, eastern Scotland could be a touch of frost. But it will be a bright start for many places, with lots of blue sky to take us into Tuesday. The exception, though, will be the north of Scotland, where a weak weather front will be coming in here through the morning, bringing some sporadic bits and pieces of rain, and this tended to break up into more general sunshine and showers across the northern half of Britain as we go through Tuesday afternoon. Elsewhere, I should say, mostly fine and dry, but those temperatures, once again, no great shakes at the time of year. Mid-teens just about sums it up for most of us. It stays mostly fine and settled as we go through the second half of this coming week. A few showers around, but some dry and bright weather nonetheless. But temperatures still struggling, but rising a little from earlier in the week.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Home Secretary warns a reliance on foreign workers will cause people to forget how to do things for themselves as she challenges the Prime Minister over net migration.
Hello there, very good to see you. It is 7 o'clock on this Monday, the 15th of May. Thank you for your company. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News, on telly, online, on the radio with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Suella Braverman will today urge Rishi Sunak to bring immigration numbers down amid predictions net migration could reach as high as 1 million. In a speech today, she'll argue it's not racist to want to control the UK's borders.
Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of attempting to rig future elections with proposals to expand voting to EU nationals living in the UK and 16-year-olds. Tory MPs claim the Labour leader is laying the groundwork for a second referendum.
NHS consultants could join junior doctors and nurses on the picket line as they begin voting in a strike ballot today. It comes as the head of the Royal College of Nursing warns walkouts will continue until Christmas unless they get a double-digit pay rise.
And Kate Winslet won well at the TV Baftas last night for her online addiction drama, I Am Ruth. The series, which stars her real-life daughter, Mia Threppleton, also took home the award for Best Drama, which the pair accepted on stage together.
And I should say, we've been talking about bereavement in the last hour and what happens when somebody close to you passes away. How much time does your employer let you take off? Well, David in Chelmsford has got in touch with a really sad story. When my father passed away a few years ago, I was working for a company that allowed employees 2 bereavement days per year. I had to take at least a week before I was in any fit state to go back to work. Needless to say, I was hauled in front of my boss at the time and threatened with dismissal.
Oh, you're better off not working for them. That's the way they think. Especially sudden death. Sudden death's very, very difficult for people to cope with. And if you've got a boss that doesn't understand that, you're better off not with them, I would say. I wasn't happy with that, and I took the threat further and had the decision overturned, though. It's about time these regulations, policies were changed, because everyone is different and deals with grief in their own way. Absolutely true. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to that top story. The Home Secretary will issue a warning to the Prime Minister today, saying a reliance on foreign labour will make people in this country forget how to do things for themselves.
Well, Suella Braverman will call for the Conservatives to renew their 2019 manifesto commitment, which promised to reduce migration.
So her comments come ahead of the release of official figures, with the Home Office braced for those figures to surpass 1 million this year. It's all very complicated, but basically more people are coming into the country than are going out. Former political director to Boris Johnson, Alex Crowley, is here this morning. What I'm more interested in, Alex, is why Braverman's been so brave.
Is it brave, or is it the last-ditch attempt to try and get her own way within Cabinet? You see this, of course, if a Cabinet Minister can't convince their colleagues or the civil service, they tend to then take their case directly to the public and directly, in this case, to the Conservative sort of activist base. There is a bit of a battle within the party. There is one side which thinks that the way to electoral success whenever the election comes is to get immigration numbers down in absolute numbers. And then there's the other side of the party that says, well, hang on, if you look at why people voted for Brexit, it wasn't necessarily about the numbers, it was about having control. And control is what we've now got. And actually what really matters is the symbolism of dealing with small boats, because that's what most voters see as a loss of control. We will see over the next week or so which side of this argument prevails.
And you talk about the split within the party, but that split going right up, as you say, to the top of Cabinet with I think it's the Education Secretary and the Chancellor both being in favour of immigrants bringing in lots of skills and boosting growth in this country. And then other people now, like the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, overtly out of step with the Prime Minister. But I suppose Rishi Sunak's been kind of famous for having a cabinet of all different opinions. That has been his thing, hasn't it? How does he go forward with breaks in discipline now? Is this inevitable after the poor showing at the local elections recently?
Yes, Rishi Sunak's done very well so far to maintain a lot of discipline within Cabinet. Generally speaking, we haven't seen lots of leaks or public rows between ministers, and that's a good thing, by the way. But, of course, in the light of difficult election results, yes, you would expect 1 or 2 little cracks to show. And maybe perhaps Rishi Sunak is allowing certain people to blow off a little steam, and perhaps we might, and that's, I suspect that's why she's being allowed to make this speech. I mean, if Rishi Sunak really didn't want her to make this speech, she wouldn't be making this.
But it does directly contradict what Grant Shapps was saying on the airwaves over the weekend, which will leave a lot of people bemused about exactly what the direction of travel is. But specifically, the Home Secretary is saying it's not racist to want to get control of our borders, and she wants to be able to get British people working, to pick the fruit, to drive the lorries, to be in the meat industry, the butchery, or whatever it might be. Because at the moment, we can't fill those vacancies, and we are having to bring people in from abroad. But is that reality? Do we want to do those jobs? Because surely if we did, we would.
Well, yes, exactly. The reality of the pandemic and post-pandemic is that an awful lot of people have left the workforce at all levels. And so the Treasury are probably rightly saying that, well, if we don't fill these positions, how are we going to get the food on our shelves? How are we going to actually get this economy back to something like growth? There are short-term considerations here, and I think that's probably what Rishi Sunak is prioritising.
Long-term considerations, we hear from Sir Keir Starmer. He wants to open up talks and develop the idea of 16-year-olds getting the vote.
Yes, he does, and I think this is, look, we're going to see this over the next few months. There's going to be a lot of flirtation between Labour and the Lib Dems. When I saw this story, that was the first thought come to my mind. Labour are now going to start floating all sorts of interesting things, areas of common ground with the Lib Dems that they could possibly agree on as part of, I don't know, maybe a coalition agreement. Is this the top priority for people at this time of a cost of living crisis? No, of course it's not. Okay. But that's what they're focusing on.
Okay. Alex, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate it there. Alex Crowley, political analyst and commentator there. 7 minutes past 7, and Turkey's relationship with the West hangs in the balance this morning. There was last night's general election vote likely heading to a runoff now. Later this month, neither candidate secured an outright majority.
Well, let's speak to our reporter Paul Hawkins, who's in a Turkish cafe in Surrey this morning, finding out how expats there are feeling about the election. And I suppose, at the end of the day, Paul, this is all about whether or not they accept a sort of continuation of authoritarianism under President Erdogan, or a move towards the West and NATO and a bit more of a democratisation again.
So, yeah, that's absolutely right. Morning to you both. Turkey had a bit of a crossroads, really. They've had 20 years of President Erdogan, who's really given himself powers to rule Turkey with more of an iron fist, especially after that attempted coup in 2016. And now you've got this opposition candidate, this unity candidate, Kılıç Daroglu, who really has brought a lot of the opposition together and is polling at the moment that 98% of votes counted Kılıç Daroglu on 45%, Erdogan on 49.49%. He only needs 50 plus 1% to win to keep the presidency outright. So he's very close to that margin, but we think it's going to remain that way, which means they'll go to a second runoff in a couple of weeks between the top two. That person behind me is Ataturk, the first president of modern Turkey who swept away the caliphate and actually warned about the kind of rise, the potential rise of authoritarianism within Turkey. And a lot of people are saying, look, that's what Erdogan's become. He's become a kind of like the anti-Ataturk. But let's speak to someone who voted in the election. We speak to Irfan Turker, who's owner of Pasha Cafe in Chobham. Irfan, first of all, if you don't mind me asking, how did you vote?
I voted for the opposition to Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu.
Right. Okay. Just tell us, why is that?
Alternative for Erdogan, basically.
Yeah. But you I mean, we've spoken about this when we were off air, and you were saying that you're not a massive fan of him either, but better than Erdogan, or less bad than Erdogan?
Well, when Erdogan came into power, Turkey was in crossroads themselves as well. I'm not suggesting that he did everything bad. He brought some new ideas to Turkey. But afterwards, the power got to his head, that I believe. And by changing the system from parliamentary system to presidential system, didn't work for Turkey. And he himself has said that it wasn't the best thing that he should have done. Turkey has to go back to the parliamentary system back again, and Kılıçdaroğlu is the one who's going to pursue it. That's the reason why I voted for him.
Because he's going to take power away from the presidency and put it back towards the parliament.
That's correct. The power belongs to the nation, not to one man.
Yeah, and how would that work actually? Because the AK party, which is Erdogan's party, it looks like it's going to win a majority in parliament. So how would that work then if Kılıçdaroğlu wins the presidency?
Well, there's going to be crossroads again. Unless they change it to the parliamentary system, everything will be within his grasp.
Yeah.
Once he changes, then they will vote on things differently. One-man power is not a good idea for Turkey.
And the two big election issues were, of course, the earthquake, which I know you've been to see the aftermath of when you visited Turkey. Tell us a little bit about that, and also how high inflation is in Turkey at the moment, because officially 40%, but some people think it could be close to 100.
Yeah, it is much higher than that. As I said, this one-man management is not a very clever idea. Erdogan has got the full power for the media, for the national institutions and everything. one of his tweak, the institution who governs the inflation rates, is in his grasp. He dictates what they want him to say, but there is a parallel institutions who say otherwise. So the institution, the governmental institution says that it's 40%, but it's much higher than that. You know that from the general consensus in the market, in the supermarkets, with everything else as well. The buying power has diminished completely.
Because here, interest rates have been rising, haven't they, to try and curb inflation. I heard that Erdogan he doesn't want to put interest rates up. In fact, he's actually cut them.
That's correct. He's got his own economical policy against all the economical science. By cutting the interest, he thinks that he's going to do things. But the economist in Turkey says exactly opposite of it. But he says, I, me, basically.
Yeah. Very good to talk to you, Irfan. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Irfan Turker, owner of Pasha Cafe. You might be wondering at home, well, why does this matter to us? Turkey, big strategic nation. Geographically, where it sits, straddling Europe and Asia, is almost like a metaphor for how it acts out politically and democratically. It balances its relations. It's friendly ties with Russia, friendly ties with China. It's become, under Erdogan, less pro-West. In terms of migration, it takes a lot of migrants, and in exchange for that, the EU gives it billions of dollars worth of euros. So it's very influential where it sits and how it affects what happens in the West and around the rest of the world, I should say.
And the big question now, Paul, is, of course, now that you're through the door of the cafe and you've done your interview, what will you be having for breakfast? What's on your mind?
What's the Turkish breakfast involve?
Do you know what? Max does a very nice morning feast, and what you get with it is something called sucuk, which is like spicy Turkish sausage. So I'm partial to a bit of sucuk, if you can get hold of some.
I like
good
some
stuff.
baked eggs, good baked eggs in the local.
Very envious of you. Thanks very much,
you.
my friend. Appreciate it. The time now, 30 minutes past 7.
We're going to talk about energy now. I know it's getting a bit warmer, the sun's come out this weekend, but actually looking ahead to the winter, things could be a bit more gloomy.
Where did the sun come out?
Well, was it not sunny where you were? I'm sunburnt today. Southwest of England. I've been in Somerset all weekend. It was scorchio.
Lucky you.
I know. Anyway, the government's current energy strategy could see people's bills skyrocket, according to research by the Energy and Climate Change Intelligence Unit.
Oh, what have they done now? Well, the research says unless the government invests widely in insulation, heat pumps and renewables, it could cost us all about 500 quid extra a year. Have we got a handle on all of this or not? Let's ask Will Hodson, consumer champion, how to save it. How are we not saving it? What does it take for something to be done on this?
Well, I think it takes a long, hard look at what kind of crisis we've just been through. Because the fact is, Eamonn, it could have been worse. In some ways, we thought we had the perfect storm already, and that's what this report goes to. First of all, Britain has got really old, drafty houses. It takes a lot of gas to heat. Second, our electricity mix is reliant on gas, and that's why we were so desperate when the price of gas went through the roof. But remember, this last winter was mild. We didn't need that much gas, relatively speaking, and it was still awful.
Yeah.
So next winter it could be worse. Right. The question is, how do we put it right?
How do you put it right? Not with the policy that we have at the minute, which is against gas, what would you say, drilling, exploitation, whatever you call it, and storage. We don't do either of those. So I'm fine. If people say, well, we can't mine coal, we can't drill for oil, we can't drill for gas, but we're still taking it in from around the world, from other countries, aren't we?
Well, the report today says that our imports of gas at the moment are 50%, but that's going to go up to 85% by 2035, when we're going to be spending about £500 per home on overseas gas.
Well, why don't we just keep drilling our own until we're not dependent on it?
Well, I think it's a bit of a red herring, actually, because the cost of gas will be the same no matter where you get it from. So if it was being fracked, which was slightly yesterday's issue, that was going to be explored by a private company who was doing it because they wanted to sell it at the top price they could sell. So it's not in any way going to reduce our bills. What does reduce our bills is British domestically generated energy, like wind, like solar, and that's what's going to come in and flush out the gas and the fuel mix and make our bills more affordable.
Will, you talked about how last winter was actually relatively mild, even though we had high costs of energy. We also had a huge government support scheme, which will not be in place come this autumn, when we will still have really high energy prices and no support from the government.
Yeah.
So that's worrying for a lot of people.
It is. Well, that's the embodiment of a hand-to-mouth energy policy, where we set ourselves up to be so vulnerable. Drafty homes needs a lot of gas, electricity, still gas. Price of gas goes up, we're in deep trouble. So how do you work through those problems in order? The answer is, first, you look to roll out a proper insulation scheme. We've got the oldest, draftiest housing stock in Europe. We can put that right.
Are there any government schemes for that? Can you get any good deals and support if you want to insulate your loft, for example?
There are. So there's the energy company obligation, known as ECO, and that means free grants for some of the most essential insulation. We've got 2.5 million homes in Britain have already benefited from that, but unfortunately, there's been a big slowdown in the installation rates over the last 10 years. We need to see that being picked back up. And at the same time, deployment of more renewable energy, which is British energy, and that's going to bring our bills down. It's about 1/8 of the cost of gas during the last energy crisis.
Just finally, away from the sort of domestic fuel costs, why is it that they're still really high when actually the cost of fuel at the petrol pump, although it's still high, but it's been kept artificially high, isn't it, by all of the organisations, whatever they might be? How is it suddenly cheaper for fuel but not for energy fuel? Follow. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
So it's procured.
Domestic stuff.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So don't forget that the price that we're paying for our domestic energy bills is a highly regulated product. It's not a question of going out, buying energy on the market today and selling it to British punters. It's highly regulated. It means that Ofgem, the regulator, have said, I want you to buy this much energy a year ago, this much 6 months ago, this much 3 months ago, and we're going to blend those prices to see what you can charge to a British home. By contrast, what you get at the pumps might have a totally different set of calculations.
OK, thank you for explaining that.
But if we don't get it right, we all pay for it, as much as 500 quid a year. The time, 18 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise. And senior doctors have started voting on whether to strike over pay. It's after the BMA Consultants Committee said talks with the government remain deadlocked.
The Prime Minister says new community diagnostic clinics will drive down NHS waiting lists. More than 100 centres are already being used across England, with 30 more set to open before the end of the year.
Last night's Bafta Awards saw lots of British talent scooping the top acting prizes. Kate Winslet won Best Actress for her role in I Am Ruth, whilst Paddington star Ben Whishaw took home Best Leading Actor for his performance as an under-pressure doctor in the series This Is Going to Hurt. Sir Mo Farah also won for his documentary, which revealed he's been illegally trafficked to the UK as a child.
Just some breaking news to bring you. In the last few moments, we are being told that President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is to arrive in the UK this morning for meetings with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. It's being described as substantive negotiations, and this comes after his trip around Europe. This will be the fourth stop, I think, as he's travelled around the continent, and a few months on since his last visit here in February, when we gave them the Wings for Freedom and agreed to train up a number of Ukrainian pilots. But that breaking news this morning, Volodymyr Zelenskyy due here in London this morning to meet with the Prime Minister.
Coming up, as children begin A-levels and GCSEs, we'll ask if we put too much importance on exams.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up to 25 past 7, still to come on the programme today.
Gatwick was forced to shut its runway yesterday after a suspected drone was seen close to the airfield. So at 7:45, we'll get all the details and ask if this is something that will become more common with Simon Calder.
Well, it was either a drone or they think it may have been a helium balloon. He's not a balloon, he's Jacob Rees-Mogg. 8:15, look at that. It's lovely to see behind the scenes, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, did you see me do that?
Yeah, because they panicked. And Jacob Rees-Mogg, there he is again. He'll tell us why he thinks Rishi Sunak risks making the country poorer ahead of a big speech at the National Conservative Conference today. You can make your speech to us. GBviews at gbnews.uk. You can tweet at GBnews. There's a very interesting thing happening today. About a month ago, I had to donate some DNA for a genealogy project interview that we're doing on the programme today. Isabel is so frightened of what her DNA would show that she didn't donate any, but mine turned out to be very interesting. And they tell me today that they are putting me in touch with a cousin I have in Australia, which I didn't know about. I didn't know I had a cousin in Australia. And also a picture of my great-great-grandmother.
And you've never seen a picture of her?
Never seen a picture of her before.
And actually, the guy who looked into your DNA, without giving too much away, said in his entire career, you'd only ever come across one other case like Eamonn's. Doesn't surprise me. When they say he's 1 in a million,
He's an alien. He's an alien, or he's superhuman, or something like that. But that would be very interesting. What I thought I was, where I thought I'd come from. Apparently, he's all a bit of a nonsense. So that's interesting. 8:45. doing that one. If you're not here, set the recorder.
Because some of you may be heading off to do exams today. A-levels, AS, GCSEs, all getting underway, not to mention the dreaded SATs for 10 and 11-year-olds and even 6 to 7-year-olds.
Well, the saga of sitting exams has been a crucial part of the education process since time immemorial, but are exams really the best way to test intelligence? I would say if you're good at them, yes. If you're not good at them, you'll say no. Joining us today, inclusion consultant Kirsty Nicole Hadley. What is an inclusion consultant? What's that?
We try and fight for a more inclusive sort of society, so for rights for lots of neurodivergent kids and kids with different educational needs and also in the workplace.
Gotcha. OK. And very much in the workplace, a woman that knows what it takes to get ahead in the workplace. Dawn Neeson, former newspaper editor and now social commentator who argues time, tests, instill discipline and a spirit. What sort of spirit within you do you think, the discipline
the determination? And I think, I think most sensible people will see both sides of this argument, but however, we are going to disagree for the purpose of debate. Exams are they're really tough things to do. I still have nightmares about doing my A-levels, and that's like 40 years ago. But I do think for the majority of children, they are a very good way of preparing for what faces you in real life. Real life isn't always easy. You are going to face challenges. You are going to feel pressured. You are going to face anxiety. And I think the discipline of studying for and researching for exams is a very, very useful tool to get you through life. There is also the disappointment. You learn to cope with disappointment because most people fail exams. It is what happens. But also the sense of achievement when you do quite well. Now, I know that...
I suspect you did quite well, which
no,
is why
I did. Look, Eamonn, I actually... The anxiety of... Maths is not my strong point. Some people say lots of things are my strong point. But maths is not my strong point. And I was so anxious about doing my maths O-level when it was O-levels for GCSEs. I actually passed out halfway through the exam.
Oh,
I literally fainted through the exam. Well, I still passed.
You might relate then to what Ben Fogel, National Treasurer, has said in a letter to the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, and I just want to read you a little excerpt from it. It says, education should not be a competition. Exams bring stress and anxiety to a generation of kids who should be full of hope and excitement about their education. It should enthuse, empower, embolden and fill our youngsters with the wonder of learning, not the trauma of exams. I failed my exams, but exams failed me. Exams crush the spirit of us who are exam lexic. Let us know if you agree with him.
Exam lexic, and exams failed him, he was saying.
Well, I think that... what I think is one thing, actually, but I asked my child, my 11-year-old child, what they thought about exams and whether or not we should abolish tests and exams. And they said that, yes, which is probably no surprise, because most 11-year-olds would say that. But they backed that up by saying that kids who don't do well in tests and exams would then have access to better jobs and more equal opportunities because their grades would be assessed overall rather than having to sit down and go through the stress and anxiety of a test that they find really difficult. Because I think that in a lot of these cases, we are, in fact, just teaching children how to pass tests.
But how else do you assess how a child, A, has got on with the curriculum, what they understand of it, and B, what their actual ability, mental ability is? Because if you take away exams, you're left with coursework, right? Well, we've got AI now. We all know that ChatGPT means that you can completely cheat everything. So how else do you do it? If you take away all the tech, sit them down, that's the most raw version of someone's intellect.
I think that's such an important point, and there's a very recent study showing that exams are actually more important than ever because the ChatGPT, which I have no pretense at understanding how it works, but they can literally write essays, they can literally get newspapers out these days, but they can write essays for you. So in New York and where else was it? New York and Japan, schools and universities are saying that coursework now almost has to be done under exam conditions because it's the only way that children will be themselves rather than using on a ChatGPT to do the essay for them.
I can see the sense in that. Dawn, I remember, by and large, I had surprisingly been from a non-academic household. I had a surprisingly pleasant time at school, primary school and grammar school. But I remember when life changed for me, which was when I was 10, and I had to sit the 11 plus, and in the days before tutors and all that sort of thing. But that really did. It became serious. And then you talk about the dreams that you have to this day. I still have dreams about certain homeworks when I was at grammar school and whatever. And that is a long time ago for me. So that is the inverted commas trauma that it puts on you. But I do remember that. Also, Nikki, I would say that people whose lives literally changed. I was in a class of 44 at primary school. 8 of us passed the 11 plus, and the lives of those 8 were completely different than the lives of the rest of the kids in that class. I mean, in terms of career and what they went on to do.
Well, first of all, did you just call me Nikki?
Sorry?
Kirsty.
Oh, Kirsty, sorry.
It's a recurring theme. I think that, like, on a very basic level, when we find ourselves in a situation that teachers, children and their families are all in agreement, mostly, that this system is traumatising our children, it's time for us to get our heads together and find a new way of doing things. Because when do the teachers, the children and the parents all agree on something? And really everybody is in agreement about this. The current examination and testing system is traumatising our children.
Ben Fogel makes a really interesting point. He says the exams have been produced by a lazy education department that doesn't seem to care about the welfare of our children. We're all unique. We should celebrate our individuality rather than trying to force us all to be the same.
He's right, that costs money.
But yeah, I mean, it goes back very well to Kirsty's point. I mean, everybody comes up with criticisms of every system we have at the moment, from the NHS to politics to exams, but no one comes up with answers.
Yeah.
What is the answer to this? I mean, I can understand where Ben's coming from. I completely understand where Kirsty's coming from. But what I don't know is what the answer is with, as we've just discussed, with ChatGPT and machines doing everything for us. How do we know how well a child is actually doing if we don't examine them?
We are all guilty of this, TV companies, and it comes exam day, and we'll do it again this year. We do it every year. I'm not a fan of it in the slightest, but you go to some school where little junior will open their envelope as to what their exams will be. I've never, ever, ever in 42 years of presenting breakfast television seen anybody who's failed or not done well in their exams on those mornings. So not only do they do well, but they're a star all the time, whatever. And I don't know what sort of message that sends out, because there's got to be a lot of kids who are sitting in, well, that's not me. That didn't happen to me.
Yeah, and they don't see themselves represented there. And I think that then adds to this sort of feeling of feeling broken or faulty in some way. And I mean, if we look at the statistics, there's currently almost 2 million children that are out of full-time education. And these aren't children that don't want to go to school. These are the children that can't go to school because of the way the education system is set up and the way that they're tested. And it's estimated that those children, the amount of children that aren't in school with ADHD have received over 20,000 corrective or negative messages about themselves by the age of 10. And it's like, what's that doing to their self-esteem, you know? They deserve better.
Well, I would always make the point that some of the cleverest people I know, some of the most bookish people I know, haven't necessarily gone on to have the most successful of careers. And it might feel like the end of the world if you don't get into Oxford and Cambridge or whatever at 18, but actually, those people I know that went to Oxford and Cambridge didn't necessarily have some of the best careers. And you point to a lot of the big people in industry. I think it's, Richard Branson failed his GCSEs. Jon Snow famously flunked his exams. Many of these people are incredible entrepreneurs.
See, the difference I had is I wanted a career, I wanted a job, and I knew what that job was going to be. And exams set me up for that. And I didn't want to go to Oxford or Cambridge. I couldn't have got into Oxford and Cambridge anyway, but it was absolutely no ambition for me, nor do I see how it would have been an advantage to me in the career that I chose. But I do think, Dawn, that the thing that helped me most through school was sport, and the idea of being competitive, and the idea sport did more for me than anything else. And maybe I see a bit of that in exams. I never learned to lose, Isabel.
He was always a winner, Isabel. Come on.
But I think that's one of the benefits of sport.
No,
is you understand that
never,
you don't
never
always
learn
win.
to lose.
No, never accept
it
losing.
becomes a habit.
Absolutely.
So what does sport teach you then? Discipline.
To win.
Right.
To be competitive.
To be competitive and disciplined. I mean, we come from the same background. We're similar, not quite as old, but similar age group. So I completely understand that. And I think the one thing I would like to come back to the Oxbridge thing. I didn't go to university. Quite obviously, I didn't go to university. But I do think one emphasis we place too much on exams is that every child has to go to university, every child has to have a degree, or they are a failure. And I think Suella Braverman's speech today about training people to do jobs like lorry drivers. My dad was a lorry driver. I'm incredibly proud of what he did. Yeah. That we shouldn't demean these jobs. You know, we shouldn't demean the traditional working class sort of like slightly sneered upon jobs these days.
Demeaning it though.
No, she's not demeaning it. She's actually saying that these jobs should be well paid. We should respect what everybody does for a living, for God's sakes. It doesn't matter whether you've got a degree or not. So I think there is an argument here that with the exam situation, the fact that, you know, so much is put on university degrees is completely wrong, and we should encourage children at that age to be able to go, whether it's sport, Eamonn, or apprenticeship or anything.
Kids need literacy, and they need, you know, basic mathematics,
basic education,
figures, whatever it is. They don't need exams by and large, but they do need skills, whether it be a carpenter, whether it be a motor mechanic, whatever, that we can stand back and say, wow, they do that really well because I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and I think it's like asking ourselves the question, do we want to instill a passion for learning during our kids' formative years, or do we want them to be taught that learning is a thing to dread and be stressed about and dislike?
Learning is the most beautiful thing.
It should be an adventure, right? It should be a really beautiful journey of exploration and discovery.
I was lucky I had teachers that taught me the value of that from a primary school level.
Very lucky.
We could talk about this all day, but we've got to stop it there. Kirsty Nicole Hadley and Dawn Neeson, thank you both very much indeed.
Interesting debate. Let us know where you stand on it at home. But also, we're going to be discussing growing demands for Rishi Sunak to scrap the so-called tourist tax as we go through the papers next with Sean McDonald and Anna Mikhailova.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 7:41. Joining us to go through the papers this morning, our Deputy Political Editor for The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova, as well as the broadcaster, Sean MacDonald. Welcome back to both of you.
And one of the things we're going to talk about later on is that President Zelenskyy has arrived in the UK. So I presume, Anna, he comes because he has got to keep the profile, he's got to keep the West's interest up on what's going on, but he probably needs something as well, be that ammunition, be that hardware on the battlefield.
Of course, and obviously the last visit we had, he gave that very emotive speech in the House of Commons where there was a plea for more weapons, for more support, so I suspect we can expect a similar thing.
OK, well, we'll be talking about that a lot this morning. But, Sean, let's get into the news this morning with this story, Brothers in Arms, really moving picture, which I have to say has been featured in a lot of the papers, carrying Rob Burrow over the line during a marathon.
Yeah, this is a really bittersweet story. There's something really lovely about it, but also very sad. So Rob Burrow, former rugby player, was diagnosed with motor neuron disease in 2019. And for anyone who's unaware, it's a very cruel affliction. It basically takes away the ability to eat, speak, move and then breathe. Now, Kevin has raised millions for research into the disease by running marathons, ultramarathons and other races.
But we should also just reinforce to people that it wasn't too long ago since these two were on a rugby pitch together.
Yeah, that's
and the fact that fella has declined to such a level. But what a beautiful act of friendship, of respect, of being brothers in arms, that he lifts him up and he carries him over that line at the end.
Honestly, yeah, it gave me a wee bit of a shiver when I saw it, because not only that, he pushed him the full distance of the marathon. Now, running 5K is very difficult. Running a marathon is really difficult. To do that while pushing your friend, and I think it just demonstrates a real act of love. And I think people looking at this, you're like, it's just such a very pure
symbol
thing. It's really lovely. You just wish them all the best and just hope that they do continue. He's raised millions, and you just hope that they continue to raise millions. Just
to fight this hideous disease.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Right, Anna, let's look at the Mail. There are calls for the Prime Minister to scrap the tourist tax. Just explain about this, because this is a tax that wouldn't actually benefit us here. Effectively, it would be a tax break for people coming to visit the UK.
Yeah, so why do we care?
It wouldn't directly benefit us, but it would very much benefit our economy. So this is the ability for tourists to be able to claim back their VAT when they come shopping. And it would be a really good benefit of Brexit, in fact, because it would mean that we'd be the biggest European country that allows EU countries to do this. So we can currently travel to, say, Italy, buy a handbag and then claim back the VAT there. So the argument is very strongly
Has anybody ever done that?
Yeah, I know people who've done that. People do that.
Do you?
But the point is, you want to give. We've got such, the economy's in the doldrums. We've got absolutely anemic growth. We need every little help we can get.
No. But I'm just actually saying, in practical terms, have any of us ever done it?
A friend of mine did it in Milan.
Yeah?
Yeah, people do it. I've heard of people doing it or recommending doing it if you go abroad right now because, you know, everything's so expensive. You're sort of trying to find
ways of cutting the corner.
I think the Prime Minister was at a business conference fairly recently. I think it was the boss of Burberry who put him on the spot.
Chairman of Burberry,
And he came back and saying there are good fiscal reasons for not changing this. So what's their argument in defence?
That's the Treasury lines. The Treasury officials say it'll cost money to reinstate it, but an independent analysis that is the backbone of this campaign shows that there will be a net gain of around 350 million a year, in fact. So it's a boost to the economy. Loads of business leaders are behind it, and now 40 Tory MPs have written to Rishi Sunak urging him to scrap the tax.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, we do not understand our own tax, and nor do we understand the state of the country's tax enough. But basically, Treasury is a thieving department, and the country is totally broke. Totally, like to a level that people just wouldn't even comprehend. Yet, these politicians continue to spend not their money, but our money on this. And then, if you're on a loan charge, if you're on IR35 regulation, whatever, if this affects you, you'll know all about it. But they come stealing. And not only stealing, but they go retrospectively. They go back 10 years and they steal your national insurance and they steal tax that they say you should have set aside when they said it was OK in the first place. But the thing is, there are so many nuances to tax, and people don't worry about tax until it comes knocking on their door. And you think, well, it won't affect me. I've paid my taxes all my life. Until they find out a way of saying, yeah, but we've reinvented the rules.
That's why we should be asking to get paid in cash, isn't it? I'm only joking. But
they hate cash.
It's something that I've come up against because now being sort of employed through like my company and stuff, it's a very difficult thing. I think it's also something we benefit learning from in the education system. You know, because when I first came up against that, I was like, whoa, what is this?
Yes.
And having to pay through the nose for advice as well.
But if you were taught something like that at school, it may well be something. Gatwick Airport yesterday, Sean, we're not sure if this was a drone or if this was a balloon from some kid's party, but basically they've only got one runway at Gatwick, I'm pretty sure to say. So what on earth happens to all the planes that can't land for 90 minutes?
Yeah, so the aircraft was diverted after there was a supposed drone spotted around 2 p.m. and they have to go to places like Stansted, to Luton, to Heathrow, and that then has this real knock-on effect for
Birmingham, Southend,
Bristol. Yeah, it's crazy. Now, one of my friends, Steve, he works at Gatwick Airport. And I was talking to him about it yesterday, and he said that they also saw something, but he wasn't able to ascertain or establish for definite what it was.
Maybe it was a UFO.
Might have been. Remember, we were talking about the UFO.
They don't want to talk about that.
That's it. But listen to this, by the way. So, very recently, last week, 5,000 feet above the Sussex countryside, a drone missed an EasyJet plane on the way to Basel in Switzerland by 16 feet. Now, Anna and I were talking sort of off-air about how the government sort of missed a trick, and when these drones came in terms of regulation, they should have came straight in and said, this cannot come near an airport. There has to be tighter regulation, because imagine that drone went into the engine. We could have been talking about a catastrophe.
It's a matter of time, isn't it?
It is,
and they've got amazing technology around airports which can, I think, sort of cancel a drone that gets into their airspace. That's the plan anyway, but it's a big worry, as you say.
Let's find out more, because we've got travel guru Simon Calder just to give his take on this momentarily. If you would join us, Simon, about this. What are you hearing about what it was around Gatwick yesterday?
I'm getting various stories, Eamonn, and good morning to you all. Basically, I'm talking to people in Crawley, which is the town which actually Gatwick Airport is part of. I'm hearing various stories, which I'm not sure how much credit I give them. The first one is that somebody has posted anonymously online, help, my lad's drone, which he got for his birthday, went out of control. I haven't seen it, and this happened about 20 minutes before they closed the runway at Gatwick Airport for nearly an hour. Now, I don't quite believe that that story. There's talk about big helium-filled balloons from a children's party drifting northwards as well over the runway. And by the way, Eamonn, you're sort of right. It is the busiest single runway airport in the world, Gatwick, but they've got a spare one just next door. And what they're going to be doing in the next few years is actually making that into an extra runway. So it will have a couple of runways to help them increase the number of flights. Anyway, this takes us straight back, of course, to December 2018, before even GB News. But I was around at Gatwick. They cancelled 1,000 flights in the week before Christmas. 150,000 people had their travel plans wrecked because of a drone, except it was never found and nobody ever knows if it actually existed, unless the villain who flew the drone allegedly is around. But just on what the technology is to keep them out of them, that there are really strict rules.
Let's hear Sean has something to say on this before you go into that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about the sort of the veracity of this claim that was put to me. Someone was telling me that there were security forces had basically were thinking that maybe this was an attack on the air traffic control system, and that it was dressed up as saying it was a drone. What do you think about that?
I think that is almost certainly not true. That the UK is pretty open about stuff that happens. I was in touch with Gatwick Airport yesterday afternoon. I mean, it's a miserable experience. I mean, the people coming in from Valencia turned up in Bristol, much to their surprise. And being the busiest single runway airport in the world, getting stuff back on track is really tricky. But there are strict rules about drones, typically 5 kilometres from an airport, and there's something called geofencing, which means that you go and buy a top-of-the-range drone. It's got a range of perhaps 4 miles. You could go and sit on a hill and fly it towards Gatwick, but you will find, if it is properly secured, that it will effectively hit an invisible wall. It will simply not fly any closer to the airspace. And anybody, of course, living anywhere near an airport shouldn't be flying drones because of the risk to aircraft. So we will have an inquiry into this, but if it's anything like the last inquiry, it will end with basically we don't know what happened. But
okay.
My goodness
Simon,
me,
Simon, thanks for your take. On, didn't know that what happened, but got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, my friend. God bless. Thank you. Right, 2 things I want you to do a minute each. Anna, supermarket bosses in number 10 Downing Street. There's the idea that the stores, this is reported in the Mirror, supermarkets are profiteering in a minute.
Yeah, this is obviously prices, everyone's seeing them rising. No one's quite been able to prove that anyone's profiteering, but it's surprise, surprise. Wholesale prices are going down, but everything else is still going up. So supermarket bosses are getting called into number 10 tomorrow to be asked, like, what's going on? Are you doing the best you can for consumers?
And Sean, your minute on Phil and Holly, if you will, in the Express.
People will be tuned into ITV today to find out what's going on there. I reckon it's a no-show from him today.
Interesting. So the Daily Express are basically saying that it seems that Philip Schofield will think he can tough it out, this public rift that seems to be playing out now with Holly Willoughby. Seems to be against Holly as well. The stories seem to be that she's kind of minding her own business, getting her head down with work. But Philip has put out a statement on Friday, which to me smacks of kind of like a boyfriend who knows his girlfriend's about to dump him, and it's a sort of last-ditch attempt at saying that he can tough this one out. So let's see if he's going to be on.
They were a butt of a few of the jokes at the Baftas last night, weren't they? And that's a sign, perhaps, that the public is turning on their rein.
Well, it won't matter what he does. He's brought in a lawyer, she's brought in PR people. As soon as the public sniff that they're as false as those who know them to be, then the public will give up. They'll stop watching, and that will be the end of that. The programme can survive. It doesn't matter who presents the programme.
Yeah, God, I remember.
They don't bring any special talent.
It's going to be Holly and Alison, isn't it? Before
maybe not Holly. Maybe not Holly. How intertwined are the two of them? That has to be established as well. Yeah. But I reckon they'll have record viewing figures today, though.
Yeah. Just for the first 5 minutes.
Imagine working with a presenter you don't get on with.
I know.
Imagine that. Just can't even think of it. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Anna. Here's your weather situation. Let's see what's happening.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your morning update from the Met Office. And we've got a damp start across southeast England this morning, but the rain should soon clear away. Otherwise, a picture of sunny spells and a few showers, but wherever you are, it will be feeling a bit cooler out there compared to some recent mornings. And that's because behind this cold front, we've got the cooler air mass, which will slowly be spilling its way across all parts of the UK. And this will set to dominate things, actually, for the first half of this coming week. So a rather damp start this morning across the far southeast of England, but the rain should clear away, and by lunchtime, the sky should have brightened for most. Elsewhere, a fair amount of cloud infilling after a bright and promising start. And there will be a few showers across parts of Scotland, northern and eastern England, and the odd heavy burst is possible in these showers as we go through this afternoon. Whereas further south and west, that's where we've got the best of the sunshine, lighter winds, so feeling warmer here, even though temperatures only peaking at 17 or 18 Celsius, and quite a cool, nagging wind around some North Sea coasts and for the far north of Scotland. Showers then tended to fade through this evening, and most places then becoming dry for a time overnight. In fact, lengthy clear spells across a good part of the UK, and where we've got these clear skies and coupled with light winds, those temperatures will be falling away. So quite a cold night to come for the time of year. Temperatures in towns and cities widely into low to mid single figures. In the coolest spots across parts of northern eastern England, eastern Scotland could be a touch of frost. But it will be a bright start for many places with lots of blue sky to take us into Tuesday. The exception, though, will be the north of Scotland, where a weak weather front will be coming in here through the morning, bringing some sporadic bits and pieces of rain, and this tended to break up into more general sunshine and showers across the northern half of Britain as we go through Tuesday afternoon. Elsewhere, I should say, mostly fine and dry, but those temperatures, once again, no great shakes at the time of year. Mid-teens just about sums it up for most of us. It stays mostly fine and settled as we go through the second half of this coming week. A few showers around, but some dry and bright weather nonetheless. But temperatures still struggling, but rising a little from earlier in the week.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
President Zelenskyy is in the UK for talks with the Prime Minister today.
A very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 15th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you for your company and however you are tuned in. We're with you until 9:30, leading the news this morning.
In the last hour, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced a surprise visit to the UK where he'll meet with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. In a tweet announcing the trip, he said the pair would hold substantive negotiations.
Suella Braverman will today urge Rishi Sunak to bring immigration numbers down amid predictions net migration could reach as high as 1 million. In a speech, she will argue it's not racist to want to control the UK's borders.
Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of attempting to rig future elections with proposals to expand voting to EU nationals living in the UK, as well as to 16-year-olds. The Tory MPs claim the Labour leader is laying the groundwork for a second referendum.
NHS consultants could join junior doctors and nurses on the picket line as they begin voting in a strike ballot today. It comes as the head of the Royal College of Nursing warns walkouts will continue until Christmas unless they get a double-digit pay rise.
And Kate Winslet won big at the TV Baftas last night for her online addiction drama I Am Ruth. The series, which stars her real-life daughter, Mia Threppleton, also took home the award for Best Drama, which the pair accepted on stage together.
Get in touch the usual way, and thank you for doing so throughout the programme this morning. There it is on your screen. And we were talking about exams, we were talking about the Tory leadership. Jackie says Rishi knows he's overpromised on his pledges, but has made future leader candidates responsible for those departments.
And lots, as you say, on exams. We should highlight those successful people whose education was less than favourable, says Simon in Cookham. And Geraldine in Bury St Edmunds said, how will we know that teachers are teaching effectively if the result is not tested? Not sure I follow. But thank you anyway.
OK, keep them coming. News just breaking. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced a surprise visit to Britain this morning where he will meet with the Prime Minister.
In a tweet announcing the trip, he called Rishi Sunak his friend and said the pair would hold substantive negotiations.
The Prime Minister says the UK will sustain its support for the war-torn country, and this is a crucial moment for its resistance.
Well, joining us now for more on this is GB News' Head of Digital News, Dan Falvey. And Dan, this will be the fourth country in Europe that the President will visit in the last few days. Shame we didn't time it to coincide with Eurovision on Saturday night. But on a serious note, what are these substantive negotiations likely to be based around?
So we know that Ukraine is planning to launch this counter-offensive against Russia over the coming months, and we've seen that over the last few days. What Zelensky's hoping to do is help continue to build that coalition across Europe and continue to keep up the pressure and the ante on countries to keep giving their support. It's worth noting there's differences in language here because Zelensky's calling it substantive negotiations. Number 10 have suggested that this is more of a catch-up, that this isn't going to be these big negotiations. I think what we're seeing from the Ukrainian president there is exactly trying to keep that pressure on the United Kingdom. But what Rishi Sunak has said this morning is we must not let them down. He knows that there is a lot that we need to do to help keep up that pressure because Ukraine are starting to make those advances on Baftas, which is where we're seeing the next big part of this war in Ukraine. And we've promised that we'll continue to give them air defences in the months ahead, which is something that Zelensky's been calling for since the start of the war.
And I wonder what we can expect in terms of optics today. The last time that Zelenskyy was in the UK, of course, the Prime Minister was in a civvies, wasn't he? They went down to a big warehouse, a military warehouse, I think an aircraft hangar or something, and there they were in green. But the Prime Minister's put out a statement in the last few moments saying the UK is sustaining our support to Ukraine from tanks to training, ammunition to armoured vehicles. And this message of solidarity will ring loud in all of my meetings with fellow world leaders in the days ahead, because, of course, there's the G7 later on this week in Japan. So, as you say, just kind of underlining what's already been offered.
Yeah, but this is a big week for the Prime Minister as well because of that international trip, he's got not only Ukraine, he's dealing with UK on the world stage. You know, we've seen a lot over the last few weeks when it comes to talk about migration, etc. This is the Prime Minister looking outwards. This is, we're talking about what's happening in the rest of the world and what's happening in Ukraine. This is the Prime Minister having to prove that he can perform on both fronts.
Boris Johnson would always sort of relish a visit or a conversation or kind of a political bounce, wouldn't he, from interaction with Zelenskyy? Do you think Rishi Sunak can benefit from the same? Because all the papers and all of our discussion up until we heard about this surprise visit this morning have been on Suella Braverman kind of breaking rank and giving this sort of controversial speech today.
Yeah, as you said, I think Boris Johnson always took a sigh of relief sometimes when it came to the Ukraine situation, because it did allow attention to be moved on to something that he was more comfortable talking about. The UK has been very strong on Ukraine, and Zelenskyy has been very clear that the UK has been one of the strongest countries in supporting it. So I think Sunak will continue to push that message hard and hope that it can distract from some of his problems on his backbenches.
All right, thank you very much. Well, not just on his backbenches, we should say the Home Secretary, among those making those criticisms of the Prime Minister's own policy, issuing a warning today to the Prime Minister, no less.
Saying a reliance on foreign labour will make this country forget how to do things for ourselves. Her comments come ahead of the release of official figures which are predicted to reveal record levels of net migration, with the Home Office braced for the figure to surpass 1 million this year.
Well, joining us for more on this is our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you, Olivia. I wonder if some will see the Home Secretary speaking out as feeling emboldened after quite dismal local election results and able to take her policy to the people because she believes this will be popular.
Yes, absolutely, and I think we can see this really as the Home Secretary breaking ranks. Rishi Sunak is now under more fire for his leadership than he has been at any time in the last 6 months. We saw the Conservative Democratic organisation holding its conference in Bournemouth over the weekend where there was lots of criticism of Rishi Sunak, and today Suella Braverman will stand up and say that she believes that we need to get net migration down. Now, it's not surprising at all that she's saying that. Net migration peaked at 504,000 in 2022. Now, remember that David Cameron once promised to get it under 100,000. And when the migration figures come out for this year in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're expecting to see it between 700,000 and 1 million people. So Suella Braverman knows that it'll be very popular saying that she wants to get net migration down. But has she squared this speech with Rishi Sunak beforehand? Then, of course, we're also expecting to see Jacob Rees-Mogg speaking today, saying that Rishi Sunak mustn't surrender to the blob. He is furious that Rishi Sunak has decided not to sunset all of those EU rules and said she scraped them off the statute book this year. So we're hearing quite a lot of rumbling in the background, and really this is the first time that Rishi Sunak has faced a proper threat to his leadership.
OK, Olivia, thanks very much indeed. We'll keep a close eye out for that speech a little bit later on today. Thank you.
We're going to talk about bereavement now and how employers deal with it in this country. I'm just looking to see. Andy says bereavement leave should be 1 week, you know, just guaranteed 1 week if close, immediate family. Nada says it depends on who's died. If it's a partner, wife, husband or a child, then yes, you do need...
I don't think I could go back to work after a week if my husband died.
Well, you couldn't go back after a year sometimes, you know, so it is a difficult, very sensitive thing. Leslie says, I work for the NHS. In a view of longer than your entitlement of compassionate leave, you have to go on sick leave and there are penalties for taking too many of those.
Yeah, it's...
David in Chelmsford. When my father passed away a few years ago, I was working for a company that allowed 2 bereavement days a year. I had to take at least a week before I was in any fit state to go back to work, which is what you were saying there. Needless to say, I was hauled in front of my boss at the time and threatened with dismissal.
Well, a new scheme is now being trialled by the supermarket chain The Co-op that aims to make things easier for workers following a bereavement. And our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, takes up the story.
Losing a loved one is something that ultimately affects us all. And when it does, sometimes it can be a struggle to try and balance grief with work.
When I lost Mum, it was so out of the blue and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't care about anything either. So it was... I just felt like I was a different person and nothing seemed to make sense or matter anymore at the time, least of all work.
When Debbie lost her mum, she was fortunate enough to receive support and flexibility from her employer. As a result, she was able to take the time she needed to process her grief.
We talk about bereavement like it's a word, but it's a person. It's about human connection, and it's about people that have been lost. I was really fortunate in hindsight, because if I hadn't, I know I wouldn't have been able to come back to work at all.
Bereavement leave is one of the top 10 concerns of UK workers right now. And yet new research has found that almost half of the people asked took less than a week off after losing a loved one. Meanwhile, 16% were told by employers they couldn't have any time off at all. To combat this, the Co-op has just introduced a new policy which not only doubles the number of compassionate leave days employees can take, it also offers them more flexibility in how they can take them.
Everybody treats bereavement and grief in a really personal way, so having that flexibility of leave is really important. 15% of people have said that time off at the beginning was really important to their well-being, helping them deal with it, helping them go through it, and then helping them settle back into what is then their new world.
Now, other businesses are being encouraged to follow suit in order to help their workers to cope with grief.
The more that we can help people be strong in terms of how they're dealing with their bereavement, the more that we can support them, the better their mental health will be, the less absence we have, the more positive people can be when they're back at work, which is better for everybody.
The loss of a loved one can be a confusing, emotional time. But by making small changes to company policy, employers could make a big difference. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
And with the time at 11 minutes past 8, we bring you up to date news-wise.
Senior doctors have started voting on whether to strike over pay. It follows the British Medical Association Consultants Committee saying talks with the government remain deadlocked.
The Prime Minister says new community diagnostic clinics will drive down NHS waiting lists. More than 100 centres are already being used across England, with 30 more set to open before the end of the year.
Last night's Baftas saw lots of British talent scooping the top acting prizes. Kate Winslet won the Best Actress for her role in the drama I Am Ruth, whilst the Paddington star Ben Whishaw took home the Best Leading Actor for his performance as an under-pressure doctor in the series This Is Going to Hurt. And Samo Farah also won for his documentary which revealed he was illegally trafficked to the UK as a child. Interesting story caught my eye this morning on the front of the Times. This is that within a decade, it could take 2 hours to fly to Sydney. But you'd have to go via space. So you basically pop out of the atmosphere into outer space, let the planet move. Charlie will tell me the technical term for that, if he's there. Charlie stepped away. Unbelievable. He had a brilliant technical term for the whatty effect?
I don't know, he's not speaking to me.
The Coriolis effect will enable you to pop out, the world to move, and obviously the curvature of the Earth will enable you to land in Sydney within 2 hours.
Yeah, so there you go.
I don't know what the environmental cost will be of that either. Perhaps if a lot of the fumes are outside of the atmosphere, it's OK. I don't know. Someone at home will know more than me on this, but would you be tempted
Have you been to
trial
Sydney?
it? I've never been to Australia, but my best friend lives in Perth. They've just started those direct flights, which take 17 hours. But even that, I just get the fear of me having a heart attack or something happening on that plane. And
True.
Also, I have small children, which would drive me crazy, 17 hours on a plane. But 2 hours, I'm there. What about you?
Yeah, but you haven't seen the price ticket yet.
Also, do you have to wear a spacesuit and things if you go to space?
You probably have to.
Yeah, and what would the throttle be like going through the atmosphere? I'm not sure that. And would you have... Because we know that, obviously... Sorry, I'm off on one now. Obviously, astronauts have problems with their bone density and they age more rapidly after spending time in space. If you spend a brief amount of time in space on the way to Sydney, could it be ageing?
Nonsense.
If so, I'm not interested.
Nonsense. Look at Captain Kirk. He's in his 90s now. Does he look, you know...
Well, he was in a lovely green screen in...
no wrinkles on a
Whichever
balloon.
Studios, stop
what?
it.
What, you don't think that was real? So I'd hate to be you. You've no fantasy in you.
Do you want to know the truth? I've never even seen a single movie with Captain Kirk. I'm not sure we can be friends.
I'm not sure we can. I took my son, who's 30 years of age, I took him to see the first Star Trek film. It was re-released a few weeks ago. And it's an acquired taste, he felt. But he said, I can see what you see in it. I can see what you see in it, Dad.
Well, thank goodness. He must be related to you. Good news. I can tell you Jacob Rees-Mogg joins us. He is talking to us this morning.
He wasn't in Star Trek, was he?
He wasn't, no. I wonder if you'd be interested in space travel.
He'd have been a very good science officer. Very, very good, I would have
Good morning to you, Mr Rees-Mogg. Look, there's a big conference taking place today and the Home Secretary will be talking about net migration. Wanted to get your views in all of this, first of all.
Well, I completely support the Home Secretary's view that there's a view in the Treasury that increased migration grows GDP, which is true up to a point, but it doesn't grow GDP per capita if the people are coming in to carry out low-paid jobs, and we don't have the infrastructure or the housing for continued mass migration. So I think the Home Secretary is absolutely right, and importantly, it's right economically. The migration that we have should be for the highest paid jobs, and we need to ensure that low-paid jobs become better paid, but are filled internally rather than from migration.
Secretary saying completely contradicts what we heard from Grant Shapps when he was doing the media rounds yesterday. And as you're talking about these jobs that at the moment are low wages and the Home Secretary wants to see things like fruit pickers and HGV drivers being paid a better wage, and yet we're hearing from the Treasury all the time, aren't we, that we don't want to see wages go up because it drives inflation, hence why we're having all these industrial strikes at the moment. What do you put as the reason between this kind of cabinet split at the moment?
Well, I think that misses a crucial point, that by relying on low-skilled migration over the last 30 years, we have seen very low increases in productivity. And part of the reason for that, I wouldn't say the whole reason, but part of the reason for that is we haven't mechanised as we should have done. So fruit picking remains an extremely labour-intensive operation. And not all fruits can be picked mechanically, but some can. And why haven't we been investing in the machinery which can then be operated by higher skilled, better paid people? So it's about increasing productivity so that you can increase wages. I went to visit, as Minister for Government Efficiency, an incredible automated warehouse which, instead of employing hundreds of people on low salaries, stacking shelves, it employed a few people on much better wages, operating very sophisticated computers and robotics that would stack the shelves automatically. And that's really important. We need to get the productivity increases that allow for higher wages, but higher wages for people who are already in this country.
And you really think that would work? You really think, I mean, because there is such a discrepancy between the jobless gap, the figures that we need in the workforce, and the people who are staying at home.
Well, and that's why it's very important that the government passed an act that was very much championed by Boris Johnson to provide for lifelong learning, so that people who may have left school without any qualifications can get back into education to get the skills that they need for these more sophisticated jobs. The UK is not going to compete globally as a low-skilled, low-wage economy. That market is taken by China and other countries that have huge populations and lower living standards. We will only compete as a nation as a high-skilled, high-wage economy, but that means that we need to have the skills, and that means more education, and it means, of course, more automation.
Yeah, and you disagree with the Treasury on this point. And I come back to the question about, you know, how worrying it is to see disagreements with the Treasury coming from within the Cabinet, specifically from the Home Secretary, such a senior position. And do you think this is a sign of Rishi Sunak losing discipline? Is this a result of the local council results? Why do we start to see this? Because up until now, he's been able to hold the line pretty well within Cabinet.
I mean, I think this is a long-running discussion within government, and I think the Treasury has simply missed the point about growth in GDP per capita, which is what matters. But if the economy just grows, but we all have a little bit less, we're not individually better off. So growing GDP per capita for each and every one of us is what really, really matters. And that's where low-skilled migration does not help. So the Home Secretary is completely right. But beyond that, if we have immigration coming in this year of 700,000, that takes up all of the 300,000 house building target and more, And we're not even meeting that target. So where are these 700,000 people supposed to live? We cannot bring people into this country without homes for them or homes for people who are already here.
You're already there, and we're talking about the Home Secretary. And yet you will be speaking today, Mr. Rees-Mogg. What will you be addressing?
What will I be addressing? I'll be addressing the broad concept of the NatCon conference, that what is important about the nation state, how the country took a bold reassertion of belief in the nation state by Brexit, and now it has to take the opportunity to implement the conservative bit of that. And that's actually a smaller state, a state that interferes less in our lives, that supports the families, let families get on with what they are best at doing, reduces the expenditure of the state so that we can keep some of our own money as well, so a lower tax state.
And I know you've been disappointed specifically about the bonfire of EU laws not going ahead to the same extent as you would have liked. Will you be saying today something along the lines of Rishi Sunak surrendering to the Whitehall blob?
Well, that seems to be what's happened, and it's a great disappointment, not least because Rishi Sunak promised that he would do this. And it is so important that politicians stick to their promises. But also, this isn't about Eurosceptic whimsy. It's about the supply side reforms that make people in this country better off by reducing prices, making the economy more competitive, ensuring that goods and services can be provided more cheaply so that people can afford more of them, and improving our standard of living. And so not getting rid of the 4,800 or as many of them as possible and just getting rid of a few rules relating to anchovies is feeble, really.
We want to talk about the Labour Party and various proposals. Sorry?
No, carry on, sorry.
Sorry. We just want to talk about various proposals Labour have on the table at the moment, or they're thinking of. And one is voting at 16. Now, I would imagine at 16 you would be old enough and ugly enough, as my mother would say, to have a political opinion. And
I'm sure Jacob did.
Yes, I'm sure he did, to be able to vote. That must be something you would find difficult to argue against.
Well, I have a very simple view, and that is, as a country, we need to work out what the age of majority is and then stick to it. So if it's 16 for voting, shouldn't it be 16 for marriage, which we've just changed to 18, or 16 for smoking or drinking? We're now about to make it 25 for certain forms of gambling. Either you're an adult and you're entitled to vote, or you're not. And I think to have a lower age for voting than the age at which you can get married and take on the responsibilities within society is odd. But that's the discussion we should be having. What is the age of majority at which you can do these things, rather than, well, at 16 a few more young people might vote Labour, which I think is irrelevant. And you're absolutely spot on. I was already campaigning for the Conservatives by the time I was 16.
I knew you would have been. I want to ask you about Labour also wanting to extend the vote to EU settled migrants, people who've lived here for a long time, people who pay income tax getting the vote. Now, a lot of people will say, look, this is just simply so that they can try and bolster their chances at the next election. But actually, there are other people seeing this as a bit more cynical. Actually, this could be a sort of backdoor out of Brexit, back into the EU. Where do you stand on it?
Oh, I stand on the thought that governments think these things up and they come back and bite them. The Conservatives, though not particularly me, were all in favour of voter ID, and then we discovered the voters least likely to vote because of voter ID were elderly Conservative voters. The Labour Party thinks this will be a clever scheme to get lots of EU member state nationals to vote Labour, and it won't turn out like that.
Okay.
I think it's a complete waste of time, but it is fundamentally cynical.
OK, fundamentally cynical. Thank you very much indeed. Have yourself a good day. We'll take a break there. Coming up, the Premier League title race looks as though it's over after Arsenal's big defeat yesterday. More with Paul Coyte next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Still to come on the programme this morning. A few weeks ago, we sent off some of Eamonn's DNA, not to find out if he's committed any crimes, but actually to find out more about his family history. And at 9:15, there are some surprising results.
What, have I fathered children somewhere?
I hope not. I don't know if it tells you that. Maybe. Who knows? Get your claim in now. But yeah, we'll delve into your background.
They've connections with me with Australia. There's something quite unique about my DNA. They're not telling me what it is, but they're saying the guy who did the
one
test.
Of a kind, Eamonn. We've always thought.
Well, he said he's never come across. He's only come across it once before.
Yeah,
once before. With my DNA, what's this going to prove?
Interesting.
Maybe I'm an alien life force who has been put on this earth.
You're definitely
something different.
A bit left field sometimes.
Now, there's a new reality show, which I've declined to be on, seeing celebrities taking part in health trends, right? And the sort of things they have to do is whoever these... what are they? Celebrities are. Have you recognised anybody yet?
Not yet.
No. So apparently they drink their own urine and they eat seeds that induce vomiting as well. And apparently it's all good for you. Do you drink your own urine?
Unsurprisingly negative.
Do you not?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, wellness, has the idea of wellness gone too far?
Oh, then you can join in our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Here's how the back pages stack up on this Monday morning. What a busy weekend of sport it was. The Mail, they think it's all over. Arsenal's 3-0 loss to Brighton all but ended their bid for the Premier League title. They only need one more win. City need one more win, and it is all over. The Express says gun and dusted. Man City's comprehensive 3-0 win over Everton, 1 win away from securing a third league title in a row. And The Guardian focuses on Martin Odegaard's comments that Arsenal have lost hope of ending their 19-year wait for the Premier League title. Paul Coyte with his take on those things.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, what is it?
It's just a quick one. I've got a quick one. Is it true that your DNA is linked to a load of Liverpool fans? Is that true?
No.
I heard that was... Are you sure that... Is that what it is? Is that what the surprise is? What would you do if that was the case?
Well, I would...
You'd be very upset. You wouldn't tell us, would you?
Well, that's an interesting conundrum.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
Yes. I tell you what, the Brighton team that turn up at Arsenal Stadium yesterday away from home...
Yes.
That's the same team that got walloped by Everton a week ago. Now, I really rate this Brighton team, don't get me wrong. I really rate them, and that scoreline shows what they are capable of, but it just shows also how the Everton game was a real... they must have just gone asleep.
It's funny because I think... If you're an Arsenal fan, I think maybe they would have looked at this two ways. You could either look at it and think, wow, look, we've got to play Brighton. Look, they got thrashed by Everton, who are right at the bottom of the league. Although Brighton had all the chances in that game, or the other way of looking at it, and you look at Roberto De Zerbi, who's the manager there and the team, there's no way he's going to let that happen again. So they would go out even more determined, especially going out to Arsenal, I think not only to prove a point to the fans and everybody else, but to themselves. And Brighton have been an absolute revelation this year. They're a brilliant side.
Superb team. So they're trying for a European place.
Who knows? I mean, they're probably just short, I reckon.
I think they're just short.
For Champions League, but Europa League certainly. And then we look at Arsenal. So the thing, have they bottled it? That's the thing. Did they bottle it? They had a fantastic season, but at the end...
It's gone.
Gone a little bit wobbly.
It's gone. West Ham might have gone a little bit wobbly yesterday, but they've got a big week ahead of them, losing 2-0 to Brentford.
They have. Well, they're playing AZ Alkmaar.
Yeah.
It's in the Europa Conference League. So so they've got that game. This is the second semi-final that they've got to play on Thursday. David Moyes is looking at it and thinking, are we safe? Just about. Rested 9 players. It's all about that European semi-final. So I can understand that. But Brentford, another side, they've had a brilliant season. Highest they've ever finished in the league, but I think it's like 80 years. So they're a top 10 finish. So they've done really, really well as well.
You OK, mate?
What is it?
I'm just looking. Do you have a temperature? Is it
a bit red? It's not glowing through, is it?
You're a bit red.
Okay, we did this game yesterday. And it was a Spurs charity game. Yeah. It was at Bishop Stortford. Amazing players. There was Ray Winston was the manager of the Celebrity 11. Really? And then we had Harry Redknapp as the manager of the Spurs. So I'm out there and I was hosting the whole thing. And it was only later on that I realised no sun cream.
Yes, I got sunburnt yesterday as well. I'm radioactive today. It's so hot, and you look like you've caught the sun.
Is it coming through? Because the thing is, let's be honest. TV makeup, they've completely covered me. It was like the first thing as I walked in the door, people are pointing, laughing, shouting. They were laughing. In my face, Eamonn, in my face. They couldn't get too close because they could feel the heat radiating from my face, moved away, and it's quite embarrassing. I don't really like to talk about it.
Oh, sorry.
I don't really like to talk about it.
Let's talk about it. It was the Women's FA Cup final yesterday. Unfortunately, it did not go the way of Manchester United's women.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Congratulations to Chelsea's women.
Yep.
That'll be the only trophy the club will see this year.
Don't be bitter about this. Is this because of the result?
Yeah, well, Chelsea winning 1-0, but
it is.
Chelsea will see nothing else.
Correct, absolutely. The women's side's great. Manchester United, though, they're getting very close, aren't they, to the power of Arsenal and Chelsea as well. But 77,000 people at Wembley Stadium for the Women's FA Cup final, and that's a world record. So very good from Chelsea. Although when we talk about Chelsea, I guess we're talking about Pochettino.
Listen, you go ahead and put some cream on.
What do you think? Aloe vera is the answer to me?
Aloe vera would be good.
You think so?
It's in the fridge. It's particularly good.
Just lay my face in it for the next 7 hours and maybe I'll be all right tomorrow?
Well, it suits you.
OK, it's embarrassment, really, you know.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We're going to have the papers up next. Who's doing those, Isabel?
Sean McDonald, Anna Mikalova for one last look at your Monday papers.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 8:38. Time to go through the papers one last time this morning with the Deputy Political Editor of The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova, who we've decided sounds like Anna Kournikova, but the intellectual version, and the broadcaster, Sean MacDonald.
Good
I'm trying to think of what that sounds like. Ronald McDonald, but anyway, I'm digressing. Let's turn
It's
to...
a bit of showbiz news you're beginning with, is it? ABBA could reunite.
Yes, ABBA could reunite for a home Eurovision.
Here Swedes go again.
Can
I
just
that.
say, right, I was chatting to Don Neeson. So it's basically saying that they could finally be set to reunite after Sweden triumphed at Eurovision. Don Neeson has a theory that there's maybe been a wee brown envelope passed.
Stop.
Basically because she said it's, I think next year is the 50th anniversary of ABBA. And how timely that is, that it's going to be going back to
Very
Sweden.
neat fit, isn't it?
Yes. Now, I'm the biggest ABBA fan in the world. Don't deny it. I take an absolute slagging for it.
Which one do you love? Dancing Queen?
All of them. Dancing Queen, Waterloo.
Winner Takes It All.
Can I just say,
Fernanda.
Glasgow gets a shout out, and is it Super Trooper?
Does it?
Yeah, is it? Well, I can't even remember now, but Glasgow gets a shout out and Edinburgh doesn't, so that shows Glasgow's superiority over Edinburgh. But yeah, so they could be reuniting for Eurovision next year.
Fabulous.
But ABBA can do anything now because of that, the way they use computers and AI intelligence and all that sort of thing, and they're visualised. What's that?
And the holograms.
The hologram type thing.
Yeah.
They could sort of do that ABBA voyage.
I just found the lyric.
Which is?
When I called you last night from Glasgow.
Oh. Yeah.
I was sick and tired of everything.
I love it. Also went to Mamma Mia, the party at the O2. So if anybody from ABBA wants to give me some tickets to Voyage, I'll be happy to take them.
There you go. Get that in.
Why would you call them from Glasgow?
Because they were on tour playing.
I called you last night from Glasgow.
And they obviously had realised that Glasgow's such a fantastic place that they wanted
going to
be
Glasgow
referencing.
next week.
Are you? Give me a shout. Let's go for lunch.
Okay. And Rees-Mogg, Mr. Rees-Mogg, was just on the programme a moment ago talking about the civil servants and the failure to destroy all this retained EU law. I don't know if you saw him there, but it's in the Sun as well this morning.
Yeah, this is the latest in this internal war within the Conservatives right now over the EU regulations that were meant to be scrapped as a result of Brexit, and now it's massively being scaled back. So far, the government's been criticised a lot by its own party. The minister in charge of it's really been criticised for not working hard enough, not pledging to scrap these 4,000 laws. But Jacob Rees-Mogg has come onto the TV and actually blamed it all on civil servants. So this is, once again, he's saying officials are being idle, it's because they're not working hard enough, and it's really an attempt to kind of take it out of the infighting of his own party and put it on to the shoulders of Whitehall.
Did you see any of that interview, Sean? He was also talking about Labour and their plans to extend the vote to EU migrants, and he basically just said it's cynical. It's not only about increasing their vote share, but also possibly a way into the European Union again.
I didn't see that specific interview, but we're obviously aware that the Conservatives, people like Lee Anderson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Suella Braverman, they're going down this sort of culture wars route because they know that's the only way that they could possibly win an election, because their record has been so shocking over the last 13 years. So I would be taking that with a major pinch of salt, you know, if I was a voter looking at that. It's just, it's trying to go down that road, and I just wouldn't even entertain the debate, to be honest.
You've got a story about parent bloggers being paid to recommend gambling sites in The Guardian today, and it feels as though the tide's turning a little bit on gambling at the moment.
Yeah, you would hope so. So it's basically saying that parenting bloggers paid to recommend gambling sites by sort of putting them into their blog posts. There was one post which was about baby food recipes, and it said in it, if you as a mum can't leave the house, then why not consider bingo online? You can click here to play bingo online at Coral. Coral, and it said, this momentary break from childcare can prove beneficial. Coral should hang their heads in shame, and it's actually in breach of the Advertising Standards Authority guidelines around gambling ads, because they must not be socially irresponsible and should not be presented as a way to relieve loneliness or depression. On my podcast and on Blethered, I've interviewed numerous people about their gambling addiction, and you're talking people who are trying to take their lives, and you've got these predatory companies trying to present this as a way of, oh, wouldn't this be fun? No, it wouldn't be fun. Gambling is a silent killer. It is an insidious thing throughout society. I don't think you should be able to advertise it at all. And you can't advertise cigarettes.
It's interesting. I totally share your views, but I never really thought of bingo as gambling, and I did always think of it as a kind of traditional community thing which could alleviate loneliness and could be positive for...
You know, if you're don't get me wrong, I actually think going to the bingo would be quite a nice wee thing to do, but see, doing it on your own, sitting, and you know, you can lose tenner after 50 quid, 100 quid, it's something you can lose all your money like that, and you can, you know, with drugs or alcohol there's a limit, but with gambling there's no limit.
That's the whole secret of it, the whole power of it, you know, to make these things, to make them look innocent. It's like, you know, alcohol is always seen as fun type thing to be involved in, and gambling is the same. I mean, I am very disturbed at the amount of gambling that is allowed to be advertised around football in particular.
Me too. They're starting to, I think the English clubs have committed, haven't they, to basically removing those shirt sponsors. I would like to see Scotland do the same. I just don't see any place in which gambling advertising should be allowed, and especially not hiding it within these parenting blogs, and honestly, Coral should hang their heads in shame for even attempting to do that.
So Prince Andrew, Anna, and his electricity bill, so he lives in this house called Royal Lodge.
Yes.
And the thing is, the theory is that Prince Charles doesn't want him living there. I don't know where Prince Charles wants him.
King Charles to us.
Or King Charles, yes. Sorry, forgive me. That'll take a while to erase. So what is the plan? What's the talk here?
Well, yeah, spare a thought for Prince Andrew, who is apparently fragile and sad and not talking to people. And he fears that he's going to be evicted from Royal Lodge, where he lives, with Fergie, in fact, as well. This is actually the second royal eviction story of the year. Before we had Frogmore Cottage, so King Charles said we're going to evict Harry and Meghan, and now he's evicting the threats to evict Andrew. And
but
Andrew
he
fears.
Evicted Harry. Though Harry would
No.
The coronation, didn't he?
Yeah.
But I think the threat is there to get him to move away, to get rid of him.
He needs to get him out and go back to America so that he can have somewhere for Andrew to go. And when we talk about Frogmore Cottage, I mean, we're talking a mansion, really. It's a massive place.
Yeah, it's not a cottage in our normal sense of the word. But Andrew, I mean, the funny thing about this story is he fears his utilities being cut off. So I think we need...
Cut him off by the utilities?
Yeah, that's his sources, his friends close to Andrew saying he's particularly afraid that they're going to cut off his gas, his water.
Because, of course, that could only be paid by the people who pay the bills. Yeah, presumably isn't him.
But I think considering it's descending into reality TV territory, it's time to just plug up cameras in all these cottages and palaces and just watch it all unfold.
Suella Braverman's looking for people to go picking fruit, maybe. He could go and do that, earn himself a couple of quid, and he could contribute to the great British economy. There you go, Andrew, get a job, pal.
Maybe it is. Guys, thank you both very much indeed. Much appreciated. The time is 8:45. We bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise. Vladimir Zelenskyy is due to meet Rishi Sunak in Britain today in the latest stop on a tour of European capitals. The Ukrainian president says the two leaders will conduct substantive negotiations around the Russian invasion.
Turkey's presidential election appears to be heading for a runoff, as it appears the two candidates will fail to clear the 50% threshold needed to avoid a second round. With almost all of the ballot boxes counted, President Erdogan led with 49% of votes, and his rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu had 44%. If both candidates don't pass the threshold, there will be a second round on the 28th of May.
Senior doctors have started voting on whether to strike over pay. It's after the BMA Consultants Committee said talks with the government remain deadlocked. Now, here's a very interesting section of the programme, especially for me, because this involved donating my DNA to a genealogist and director of content at MyHeritage, and that's Mick O'Clelland, who we're now going to speak to. Mick, very good morning to you. I didn't know what was in store or what this was about, but the bits of info that have been filtering back to me today are very, very interesting. So you took my DNA, my friend, and I know this is very popular with people trying to find out for historical reasons, for medical reasons, who they are and where they came from. But you took my DNA, and what did you do with it?
So this is absolutely amazing. This is what we're doing. Anyone at home can do it. All the clever stuff is taken care of by us. Just go to myheritage.com, start the process, a few clicks of a button. But if you remember, Eamonn, you took a very quick, painless swab of your cheek. No needles, no spitting. It wound its way to the laboratory, and that's where the magic happens. We compared you to millions and millions of other people. We built this picture of your heritage, all those little echoes of your ancestors that you carry around with you in your DNA that tell you exactly where you've come from up to centuries and centuries ago. And what we found was very interesting.
Before you say,
you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, before you say what you found, may I just say that as long as I've known Eamonn, he's always explained to me that he gets a lovely tan because his ancestors came over in the Spanish Armada, and he has this exotic Mediterranean blood that runs through his veins, and perhaps gives him that Latin temperament on occasion as well. What did you find?
So most people, like you said, have these little percentages of different DNA that might show you've got maybe distant Viking ancestors, or Spanish or French or German. And we could talk for the rest of the show about all of these different migrations through history. But what's fascinating about you, Eamonn, is when we dig into your genetics, you were untouched by all of them. You are entirely 100% British and Irish. These islands are your home and have been for as far back as we can see in time through DNA, century after century. Lots of people take these tests, they find these inspiring new homes of their ancestors in all these different far-flung shores. But to you, Eamonn, what's inspiring is that you are home, and you always have been, and that's actually quite rare.
I mean, how rare? Just explain to me, in the entirety of your career, how many times have you encountered people of 100% heritage from the place that they were born?
I've done scores and scores of these different DNA reveals, and this is the first time it's come up for me. So it's definitely one of those things that's worth talking about.
So none of the Spanish Armada there, I'm afraid to say, Eamonn.
So I am pure, of pure heritage, but my children may not necessarily be so if their mothers are tainted in any way.
Foreign blood.
Foreign blood.
That's right.
Well, Ruth's
it's worth doing tests for everyone that you're interested in finding out more about, and you never know what they might find. And when we finish looking at that mixture, these percentages, it always sparks that question, who were those ancestors then? And that's when we turn to paper records. We've digitized billions of them. We've got one here. Wherever you are in the world watching, you can do exactly what we're doing today on myheritage.com. We did it for Eamonn, but anyone can do it. We built a family tree for you that goes back to all 8 sets of your great-great-grandparents, all those people who made you who you are. Wonderful. I want to focus on 2 sets just to give you a taste of what we can discover. Yep. And these on the screen, we're looking at your paternal great-great-great-grandparents, Leonard and Bridget Holmes. Yes. And they lived in Harding Street in the dock of Belfast in 1901. Yeah. Leonard was a boilermaker. He had 4 daughters and 4 sons with Bridget, including your grandfather, David. He was 15 at the time. They were all born and raised in Belfast. And it's like looking in the window of their house and giving us a chance to see more about them. It's fantastic.
Davy had a horse and cart and he delivered coal.
See, that's where the family stories come into the records. And one thing we did find, because when you get these core records like a census, you can start looking for stories. We found your great uncle Leonard, for example, David's brother. He had to have his toe amputated in 1913. He got it caught in a steamer hatch. Everything that happens today, all those inspiring, weird and wonderful stories, they happened to our ancestors just like us, even with all those years between us.
But I'll tell you what, Miko, that name Leonard, it's amazing. You've mentioned a couple of times there. My father was called Leonard. I have a brother who's called Leonard. It's amazing that it runs in the family. And I didn't know it went that far back.
Jack will have to take on the role, or one of your boys will have to call their boys Leonard.
What about my mum's side? Because people would say that I look more like my mum's father.
I think now we might find out. So really hammering home how local your ancestors were and keeping with that echo feeling. We're going to look at your maternal great-grandparents. They lived in the same part of Belfast, only a stone's throw away, Leicester Street. Daniel Markey, stonecutter, and his wife Susan, 120 years ago. They had 9 children, including your grandmother Maggie. And we get that same window into the world, and we found this photograph of your great-grandmother. I don't know if you could see a family resemblance. She was born in 1862. We repaired and enhanced it with all the photo tools on myheritage.com, and it is really looking into that shadow of what your DNA is and who makes you who you are.
Wow.
So what was her name? She's Markey, and I think they were from Newry. They were country people who came to Belfast for work. But what was her first
Susan
name?
McAnally.
Susan McAnally. And she was your mother's father's mother?
Your great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother.
Wow.
Goodness me.
And I believe you've tracked down another relative, a living relative that Eamonn was unaware of on the other side of the world.
We have, yes. So one final revelation.
You have a daughter.
You can't have family history without family.
Sorry.
All of these ancestors come with cousins. You might need a few extra chairs at Christmas dinner now, I think, because thanks to all those millions of other people that have taken this test at myheritage.com, you've now got a list of 14,000 to catch up with from the UK, Ireland, the Netherlands, Australia, Canada, all over the world. And the closest 18 we were excited by. They range from first cousins, sharing a relative as close as a grandparent, to descendants of those great-grandparents we've looked at and that person you've seen today for the first time. And just to bring things to life, one of them has recorded a little bit of a message for you all the way from Melbourne in Australia. This is your second cousin's daughter, Kerry Nolan.
Hi, Eamonn. My name's Kerry and I live in Melbourne in Australia. And we are cousins. My great-grandmother on my maternal line was a sister to your grandfather, David. Most of my immediate family migrated to Australia in the 70s. And my mum, who had stayed back in the UK, visited Australia on her honeymoon and stayed, resulting in me being born here. Still have a lot of family back in the UK, and visit frequently. Maybe one day we can all catch up and share stories. Lovely to meet you. All the best.
And lovely to meet you, Kerry, virtually like that. It's unbelievable. I obviously don't know. I mean, does she know that I'm on the telly and things?
She does, yes. It's just fascinating that all of these ancestors that you shared sat around the dinner table one day and they've taken all these different paths through life. And now with DNA testing, all these records, all these tools on myheritage.com, the paths can intertwine again and make this wonderful full circle story. It's really inspiring.
It is inspiring because when you are on the telly, everybody claims they're related to you.
Well, we saw it with President Biden recently, didn't we? He had endless relatives climbing out of the woodwork there, and I suppose it'd be the same for you now.
Yeah, well, I do have endless relatives anyway, but I mean, do you know, because, Miko, that is so interesting. I mean, what you do and what you try to do and how you can actually join up people. And I'm looking at the great-great-grandmother, the McAnally woman, and then that lady there who was on the Holmes side of the family. And you're looking for, you know, physical attributes and things if you're like them. And I'm looking at that lady Nolan's forehead, and I think we've got quite big foreheads. Is that where that comes from and whatever? But it is absolutely fascinating. And thank you very much indeed for opening that. Just to a swab of your mouth.
Well, that's why it scares me.
You're sorry you didn't do it now.
Well, I am a bit, but I'm always a bit suspicious, and you could probably put people's fears to the, allay them, because I always just think, you know, if someone's got hold of your DNA, they can put your DNA in crime scenes, and I just would rather keep my swabs to myself, but maybe I'm overly cautious.
It's only used for family history testing. There's no other use. Everything is with your consent only. It's used just for that test, and that's all it's kept for. So no worries with anything else.
Good man.
No
fascinating journey, Miko. Thank you. Miko is a genealogist and he's director of content at MyHeritage. Thank you very much. Back after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
President Zelenskyy announces a surprise trip to the UK for talks with the Prime Minister today.
A very good morning to you. The time is 9 o'clock on this Monday morning, the 15th of May. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. In the last hour, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced a surprise visit to the UK, where he'll meet with the Prime Minister today. In a tweet announcing the trip, he said the pair would hold substantive negotiations.
The Home Secretary will today urge Rishi Sunak to bring immigration numbers down amid predictions net migration could reach as high as 1 million. In a speech today, Suella Braverman said she will argue it's not racist to want to control the UK's borders.
Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of attempting to rig future elections with proposals to expand voting to EU nationals living in the UK and to 16-year-olds. Tory MPs claim the Labour leader is laying the groundwork for a second referendum.
NHS consultants could join junior doctors and nurses on the picket line as they begin voting in a strike ballot today. It comes as the head of the Royal College of Nursing warns walkouts will continue until Christmas unless they get a double-digit pay rise.
And Kate Winslet won big at the Baftas last night for her online addiction drama I Am Ruth. The series, which stars her real-life daughter, Mia Threppleton, also took home the award for Best Drama, which the pair accepted on stage together.
Thanks for getting in touch today. We're on until 9:30, and there's how you do it.
So it is our top story this hour. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced a surprise visit to the UK this morning where he'll meet with the Prime Minister.
So he tweeted, he announced the trip. He called Rishi Sunak a friend and said the pair would hold substantive negotiations. More on this now from the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. A friend Rishi Sunak may be, but he wants something. What does he want? What's the aim? What is the purpose? Why is a trip like this important, Robert?
Well, I think it's important not necessarily because of what he wants, strangely, Eamonn. I think he's going to tell Sunak what the so-called summer offensive is going to be, what the next phase planned by the Ukrainian command is going to be in this war, and what high stakes it is. We know Zelenskyy is a supreme performer on the world stage, but not for nothing has he gone around Germany, France, Italy, the Pope, that's the peace talk element, and the UK. What he is saying is that we're in it now. The war is going to go into another decisive phase. There is a series of decisive phases. There are very worrying things about what's going on with Russia. We want your help, and we want your help for a more substantial strategy than you and the alliance has shown so far. By that I mean it's a long, rolling plan coordinated for war, but above all for peace.
Tell me this, I'm interested, because over the weekend we heard Jacob Rees-Mogg saying that Brexit was the reason that Russia hadn't been successful in Ukraine. And there's been lots of praise, certainly, over the British approach to the invasion anyway, under Boris Johnson. Is the fact that, you know, he came in February, it was the second country in the world to come and visit when Zelenskyy came to the UK after America, but this time we're fourth on the list on a tour around Europe. Is that relationship souring a bit, do you think, under Rishi Sunak?
Look, sorry, Isabel, this isn't a game of cricket scores and who goes into bat at what number. And you know your strongest batsman very often goes in down the order. Don't put anything on that. One of the reasons why he wants to talk to Sunak face-to-face, and James Cleverly, who now comes very much into the picture, is that they want them to reinforce the message to the Americans. We're still seen as the great way into the Americans, because there's one thing that has certainly shocked Ukraine, as far as I understand, and that is the Texera Discord leaks. Because when that happened, of course, there was a very strong British reaction because our interests and our allies, but particularly ours, were involved. It turns out that America immediately didn't offer a direct briefing to Ukraine about it, and it's thrown a lot of their planning sequencing. It is what you do, why, when, and how. That's the planning. It threw them out quite badly.
Robert, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. The Labour Party is considering proposals to expand the right to vote to EU nationals living in the UK and 16 and 17-year-olds.
Yes, the proposals could permit migrants who live permanently in the UK and pay tax to vote in general elections, and that would be for the first time. Well, let's discuss this with the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray. Good morning to you. We spoke to Jacob Rees-Mogg around an hour ago. He said this was frankly cynical, not only trying to garner more votes for yourself, but possibly a backdoor into another referendum on EU membership.
Well, look, I think let's put this in context. This is an internal Labour Party discussion about policies ahead of the next general election. There are many more stages to go through before things get in the manifesto, so this is not our policy yet. But let's be really clear here. Whenever we're discussing things around voting, it's a delicate issue. Things should be carefully considered about how they would work in practice and so on. You know, I think there is a general principle that if you are contributing to society, if you're paying your taxes, then you should have some kind of say over what happens in your local area. But as I say, there's a lot more Labour Party process to go through here before the general election manifesto is decided on.
Yeah, and it's an interesting principle that you talk about because it's not reciprocated, is it? In the European Union, British citizens and expats living there don't get to have a vote on national issues. So that would be unique to the UK under Labour, and some people seeing it and going as far as calling it vote rigging or even gerrymandering.
Well, look, I think whatever we decide in terms of the manifesto for the Labour Party will be the best decision for the UK. You know, we need to put the UK at the front of our minds when considering what the right approach is for us. But as I say, these are delicate issues. They need to be carefully considered. This is not Labour Party manifesto policy. This is a discussion, an internal discussion within the Labour Party that will happen over summer and into autumn and beyond. So, you know, I think that some of the reactions to it are getting a bit ahead of themselves. And I think really we should think about, you know, what do we need to do to strengthen our democracy in all sorts of ways, you know, not just in terms of voting, but also about restoring trust in politicians and in politics after all the damage done under the Conservatives.
Do you strengthen that democracy, James, by allowing 16-year-olds to vote? I mean, that's not going to repel a lot of people. A lot of us think we knew everything about the world at 16, and you're allowed to do a lot of things at 16. Why shouldn't you be allowed to vote?
Well, look, I think there's a good argument for 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote. As you say, 16, 17-year-olds can, you know, get married, join the army, pay taxes. You know, they're playing a part in society. There's a good argument for them having a say in elections. You know, so that's one of the other policies which is being considered as part of this Labour Party internal process, which will ultimately be something which is considered when the next manifesto is put together.
Tell me this, Sir Keir Starmer was talking over the weekend about his reforms to the Labour Party being like the Clause 4 reforms on steroids. Now, to anyone who hasn't followed Labour closely over the years, those were the Tony Blair changes which introduced New Labour. What does he mean by this being on steroids? What changes is he going to bring in?
Well, look, what Keir Starmer meant is that the change that we need to make to the Labour Party has to be deep and fundamental and long-lasting. And it's really important to make those changes so that we are right next to working people across Britain, so that we can be a political home for people who want a better future for themselves, for their family and for our country. And that is what he meant in terms of making the Labour Party in that position to deliver for the aspirations of the British people.
OK, James Murray, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Thanks very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thanks. Listening to James Murray, Dan Falvey, Head of Digital News here at GB News. And today we're gearing up now for whatever Suella Braverman is going to say. How outspoken is she being here? How orchestrated is this argument, or how... It's quite cheeky, isn't it, to be challenging the Prime Minister like this?
I think what we're seeing here is both with what we've just been hearing from Labour and what we're expecting Suella Braverman to do today with this speech on migration is this is both parties starting to get themselves really geared up to that next general election, which we're expecting next year. What's interesting is it is all about internal arguments. We just heard there that Labour haven't decided on this. They don't know what they're going to do when it comes to votes for EU nationals and 16, 17-year-olds. It's an internal party debate, they said. With the Conservatives, Suella Braverman's making the case that we need to reduce migration, that it's currently too high. And the Conservatives are still having, despite being in government, that argument about exactly what are they going to do around that. Now, what's really interesting on this one, though, I think, is the fact that we keep hearing the public rhetoric that immigration needs to come down, and yet the Home Office is admitting that it could hit record levels this year, which means we're kind of getting a disconnect between what the government is saying that they want to do and what they're actually delivering in practice.
Yeah, and look, I do think it's interesting that the headlines, I mean, it started last week with the Times talking about visa plans, that the Prime Minister was looking at not allowing students, family members to come over. It's weeks yet until we get these net migration figures, and yet we're talking about it already in so much detail. I almost think we shouldn't bother talking about it until it comes out when we know what we're dealing with. What's almost more interesting to me at the moment is the fact that, as Eamonn says, we have a Home Secretary with the audacity to break ranks within Cabinet. And what does that speak to? Bigger problems for Rishi Sunak? Is this as a result of the local elections where we saw the Conservatives lose 1,000 councillors?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, you look at what happened in local elections, it's caused, I'd go beyond saying nerves or jitters. There's serious concern amongst the Conservative Party that they know there's only a year to the next general election and they are not popular. And there are plenty of people in the Conservative Party saying we need to start delivering Conservative policies. We saw Suella Braverman was quite willing to express her differences with Liz Truss when she was Prime Minister. We've now got the same with Rishi Sunak. Suella Braverman knows that for her to remain popular, she needs to say what she thinks loyal Tory voters want to hear, and she's not afraid to.
Do loyal Tory voters want to hear about Ukraine? President Zelenskyy in the country today. How much a role would he have, or an influence would he have in the outcome of the next general election?
I think this is an issue that everyone is united on across politics. Both Labour and the Conservatives, the SNP, the Lib Dems, the Greens, everyone is united that we need to back President Zelenskyy and Ukraine. And I think it's one of the few issues when we've got quite toxic politics at points that everyone can really be united and say, we stand behind you 100%.
OK, Dan Falvey, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Dan. Well, we've seen driverless cars, driverless trains. Now, driverless bus service is going to start today, running between Fife and Edinburgh Park train station.
Sounds like a tram. No, or do trams have tram drivers? I don't know. Forgive my ignorance. There's a 14-mile route. It's going to be served by 5 single-decker autonomous buses. And joining us now to tell us more and shed some light on it is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Good morning to you, Tony. Tell us all about it.
Good morning. Yes, this isn't just supposedly a UK first in an autonomous driver route. It's actually believed that this is a world first to have a full route, a full system run by full-size autonomous buses. So it's a small trip, as you said, but it's certainly a giant leap for the technology. We know that the Alexander Dennis Enviro 200 buses, we've got 5 of them here. I think there's still one just took off, but we've seen a few come through this morning already, and it's quite an exciting step forward, especially as Scotland veers towards its 2045 carbon neutral target. So passengers will enjoy the 14-mile journey between here at Edinburgh Park, just outside Edinburgh, to the Fife depot, and it goes along the very scenic route of the Forth Road Bridge as well. So we know that this partnership is in kind of joint collaboration with Stagecoach, which is one of the larger bus companies up here, especially on the East Coast, and Napier University. Quite a lot of interested investment in this project. Is certainly it hopes to set the boundary for what we can come to expect from public transport here in Scotland and of course across the UK as well. So the route is funded by the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles, and up to 10,000 passengers will be transported on these autonomous buses in this 2-year project. Now, this is still an active trial. I'm sure that there will be numerous changes to the process as we develop into the CAV 2 bus, but certainly the plethora of cameras, sensors, etc. is going to be quite interesting for anybody who boards these buses in the next few weeks and months.
Have you been on one?
I haven't yet, no. My first priority was to speak to you two this morning, so maybe if I get a wee break I'll get a chance later on.
I hope they make the terminal near to the airport, because one thing I will say about Edinburgh Airport, they've got the wonderful trams and they've got the bus service, but you have to walk. It's always blooming raining. I know it's not today, but it's almost always cold, wet and windy when you get there. And most other train stations like Gatwick, straight into the terminal, not in Edinburgh. You've got to brave the elements. So maybe they've worked it out with these driverless buses. Maybe Tony, you can give us a thumbs up. Is it near the airport terminal or not at all?
I wouldn't say it's going to be a pleasant walk.
Great,
I think you'll be sweaty by the time you get into the terminal.
Fair enough. Tony Maguire, our Scotland reporter, thank you very much.
But it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, it sounds as if it's like a tram, but it's not a tram, because a tram's on tracks. So we're still trusting the whole science of it to drive us about. Interesting.
The future. Right, To The Point is coming up at 9:30. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner are here to tell us all about what is coming up in your programme this morning. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Zelenskyy obviously very big because he's flying in, big moment.
Missed the Eurovision contest though, interesting timing.
But he wasn't allowed. He wasn't allowed to speak at the Eurovision.
I don't know why he wasn't, because people say, it would have made it political. Hang on, it was political. It's always political.
Yeah.
By the way, Russia was banned from taking part. Political.
Yeah, and the fact that we were in Liverpool was political.
Yeah. By the way, the British song, useless.
There's also a theory that the Swedes actually won just purely because next year is the 50th anniversary of ABBA winning.
It is, and ABBA will reunite on stage next year in Stockholm. It wasn't the best song, but all the jury seemed to go for it, but the audience vote was massively for Finland, and massively not for us. Daily Telegraph said she didn't do well in the studio, in the conference centre because of technical issues. No, she was just useless.
Yeah.
Sorry.
OK.
Sorry to be unkind.
See, well, you're to the point, as usual. What else have you got for us?
GCSEs and A-level exams start today, so there are some concessions being made for students because of the education that they missed during lockdown. So we're going to be talking to an education expert about that, what it might mean. It's a stressful day if you're parents or grandparents or the teenagers who are sitting their exams today. And we're going to be also, we are going to be talking about Eurovision a little bit as well. And there's a conference this morning, I don't know whether you guys have mentioned it, the conservatism debate that's going on right now, and we're going to be talking about that and what it means. What is conservatism
And we've got David Davis coming in, former cabinet minister, to talk about it, because there's clearly a split in the cabinet over immigration.
Yeah.
There really is.
And working from home, is it bad for society?
There we go. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Beverly, your hair looks lovely today, and I know part of the reason your hair looks lovely is you wash it in your own urine.
Oh, Eamonn, how can you have brought
Bear with him.
But you have done
there's a reason for the link. Don't worry.
No, but you have done that.
I did do it once, inspired by a woman on Ben Fogle's New Lives in the Wild. She was a goddess. And I thought, well, that's what it takes. It actually didn't make me into a goddess. It just gave me relatively clean.
Well, there's a new reality show you want to get a look out that you drink your urine and all sorts of things. Anyway, we're talking about that next. Thank you.
I've never done that.
Sarah Miles, the actress, famously did.
She famously what?
Drank her own urine.
Did she?
She did.
For fun?
You get all the scoops on our
I've never done that, and I've never washed my hair in it either.
She had a beautiful complexion, Sarah Miles. Right, OK, we'll be back talking about how to put your wee to good use after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Continuing that conversation with Bev a minute ago when he was talking about her using urine, I just heard him talking to our next guest saying, you have the most wonderful complexion. Do you bathe it in urine?
And now I want to know. I want to know how it is achieved.
Well, Victoria Winterford is here in the studio. She does have a glorious complexion. Beautiful.
This is all about a programme, E4 tonight, 9 o'clock on E4, which has got a lot of celebs washing in their own urine, drinking their own urine, and doing lots of other things. And the extremeness of all of this. And Victoria, it is all in the name of wellness.
Mm-hmm. I just think that it has gone mad. It's just gone crazy. It's so overwhelming. The younger generation are going on social media, they're watching these TV shows and they just don't know what to do. They don't know who to look up to anymore. They don't know how they should be conforming to social media, and a lot of it is coming down to because they're not confident with who they are, they're not confident with their bodies anymore, and it's just I don't know how to approach the whole situation with what's going on with the wellness industry.
It's just become extreme. Rather than being about wellness, it's just about, I don't know, whether it's shock tactics or weight loss. But just seeing Kerry Katona there, I think it's Megan Barton-Hanson, Martin Roberts, other celebrities, many of them have pulled out, saying that it's much more extreme than they were expecting. People being asked to ingest seeds that induced vomiting and diarrhea. How can that be good for you?
Well, apparently it clears out your gut and it's good for you.
Can't you have colonic irrigation for that?
Just eat more fibre.
How can that be good for you?
I don't know, but purging violently is surely going to actually get rid of some of the healthy stuff in your gut.
Of course, and I think unless it's scientifically backed, there's no point in trying it. And then, again, no one knows what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And that's the problem. People are just trying these trends now because they're seeing it online or on social media. And it doesn't necessarily work for them. And it's causing serious health problems, mentally and physically. And this is the problem at the moment.
But it sounds environmentally good. You know, to pee in a bucket and then pour it over your head, basically. And if it makes your hair lovely and your skin lovely, but what's the harm?
From who? Who's saying this? And this is
I don't know. Have you heard any evidence of this? Have you heard factually that if you drink urine, this is going to be brilliant for you?
No. Nothing. I mean, I've not looked into that personally because that's not something that I would even consider doing.
But there are, I mean, the rise of wellness has got a market, has got people's interest. As people spend more time perhaps sat at their desk, the barriers between work and home have blurred. People are looking for something to help them be happier, be healthier. And you've got trends like the Wim Hof kind of getting cold. That is scientifically backed, and it is shown to be really beneficial to have these cold showers and things. But I was reading over the weekend, Gwyneth Paltrow's right-hand woman from Goop did a long interview in the Times yesterday, I think it was in the Times, and she was basically saying the wellness thing, it's become a cult.
It has. It really has. And again, I would say that it's like social media wellness at the moment, as much as it's a huge part of my life and my clients' life and what I really preach, but it's like going into a restaurant and opening up a menu with over 100 things and you just don't know what to choose, and it's so overwhelming and you just don't know what to do anymore. And this is the problem we're having. And I actually read some statistics, and it was from Digital Wellbeing last year, that they've done some research and 85% of people said that social media is negatively affecting the way that they feel about themselves and their bodies at the moment. That's a huge amount of people to be looking online, comparing themselves, and then that's negatively affecting how they then feel about themselves.
Because people turn to social media to look for the trick or the magic.
Exactly. And there is no magic pill. There is no trick. There is no magic pill. It's just finding what works for you. And I've always said, I don't want to get to 80 years of age and be sat there with my grandchildren saying that I lived out of Tupperware containers, drinking my own urine to try and get the health benefits from it.
It is ridiculous. Moderation in all things, and enjoy life.
A healthy, balanced diet. And if you can sustain it for the next 20, 30 years, great, do it. If you can't sustain it, just stay away from it, or speak to your doctor if you read anything that you want to try.
Well, thank you for speaking to us, Victoria Winterford, who's a wellness coach. And what are you on Instagram? What's your handle?
Victoria.Winterford.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Thank you
so
for that.
much. Thank you.
Now 2 pictures of amazing health in Andrew and Beverly.
Thank you. Good morning. A lot of politics on the show this morning. Zelenskyy, surprise visit to the UK. He's meeting Rishi Sunak,
who he describes as his friend. And there's a big fight going on in the Tory party over immigration, with Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, making a speech today. She's effectively challenging the Prime Minister. David Davis, big Tory, coming in to see us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of